welcome to the regularly scheduled meeting of Oklahoma City Planning Commission for Thursday, February the 13th. If you have a cell phone with you, now would be a really good time to turn it off or down. I should do that as well. If there's an item on the agenda that you want to speak on, if you'll get a form like this, which you'll find on the table out in the lobby, and fill it out, just simple name and address kind of stuff, and turn it in to one of our clerks. It'll be helpful for us to kind of keep track of that as we're going along, and also to have your contact information should we need to contact you later. I'm told that there are a handful of cushions available. Those benches get just too hard, which they do sometimes. For those of you who don't come and do this with us every other Thursday, what we're going to do, we have a little bit of sort of housekeeping here at the beginning, a few things to take care of. When we get to the items to be heard individually, we'll ask each of the applicants to come forward and give us their name and address, tell us what it is they're here asking for. We may or may not have questions of them. We may or may not discuss that amongst ourselves. If there's anyone here who wants to be heard either in support or opposition to that item, we'll ask them also to come forward and speak to us. We do ask that you direct your comments to us and not to each other as that process moves forward. Then we may have some conversation either with the applicant and or anyone else who's here to speak and amongst ourselves, and then we'll call each item in turn and vote separately on them. First item of business for the day is the receipt of the minutes of the January 23rd Planning Commission meeting.
Motion to receive minutes from January 23rd, 2020. Second.
I have a motion and a second to receive the minutes of the January 23rd Planning Commission meeting. Would you cast your votes, please? They are received. We have continuance requests.
We have 5 uncontested requests. The first is item 21, SPUD 1127, deferred to February 27th. Item 22, C7134, deferred to March 12th. Item 23, C7126, deferred to March 12th also. Item 24, PUD 1746, deferred to March 12th. And item 25 has been withdrawn.
Is there anybody here who wanted to be heard on items 21, 22, 23, 24, or 25? If not, I'll take a motion.
Make a motion to approve items 21, 22, 23, 24, and 25.
Second.
So I have a motion and a second, I think, to continue items 21, 22, 23, 24, and 25. Would you cast your votes, please? Those items are continued or withdrawn as designation. And
We have one new request for withdrawal, which is item number 6, SPUD 1117.
is there anybody here today who wanted to be heard on item number 6? If not, I'll take a motion.
I want to add another continuance. Adding item 16 to be continued to the next meeting on February 27th.
Is there anybody here today who wants to be heard on item number 16? We're about to continue it until our next meeting. I do have several people who are signed up to speak on that item. Are you content to have it continued and come see us later about it? Okay. Then I'll take a motion on item number 6, a withdrawal, and item number, or did we do that already?
Move
Item
approval to withdraw item number 6 and continue item number 16.
Second.
I have a motion and a second to withdraw item number 6, continue item number 16. Would you cast your votes, please? Those items are withdrawn and continued as indicated. We have a consent agenda. These are items which are relatively routine in nature, about which we are not aware of any opposition. And so we vote on them as a block rather than individually. Would you read those for us, please?
Yes, item number 1 is an application to dedicate a variable width right-of-way, and that would be located at West Memorial Road and east of North Rockwell Avenue. Item 2 is a final plat of Northeast 26th Street and Walnut Avenue. That's located north of Northeast 23rd Street and east of North Santa Fe Avenue. And item 3, a final plat of Esperanza Gardens, and that's located north of Northwest 150th Street and west of North May Avenue.
Is there anybody here today that wanted to be heard on items 1, 2, or 3? If not, I'll take a motion.
Motion to approve consent docket.
Second.
I have a motion and a second to approve items number 1, 2, and 3. Would you cast your votes, please? Those items are approved. Items to be heard separately.
Item 4 is an application for a specific plan located at 617 North Check Hall Road.
Good afternoon, David Box, 522 Colcord Drive, here on behalf of the applicant, here on a specific plan application for a hotel located along Check Hall south of I-40. This is a hotel that is permitted within the the PUD. It does conform to all relevant development regulations contained within the PUD. A fact I believe staff has indicated in their staff report on page 6. I'd be happy to answer any questions you might have. We'd ask for your approval.
The one thing that I would say about this, and even though I'm sure it probably does comply with the PUD, is that given the layout of the property, the open space between where the dumpster will be and the residential development is a little bit concerning to me, just because those things are so loud and they come to pick them up so early in the morning. If you could find another place to put it, I think that would be lovely. I'm not going to throw down over it, obviously, but you might just take a look at it. I don't know whether there's any place else it could go.
Can you pull the aerial up? Can you pull the aerial up? So in that regard, if you look at the site plan, what you'll see, the aerial that would be in the staff report, immediately south is a detention pond, so I don't know that we're really going to be buying any residential.
Well, but I mean, so that's just open space between you and residential property.
Oh, sure.
Right.
It is screened, so it is requirement. It is a newer PUD. This was just approved in 2018, so it has all of our current language about a wall, a height sufficient to screen. So we do comply with all of those. I will have the architects take a look. They're fairly long, far along the process. I'm not sure they can, but we will look at it. But we would like
I would appreciate that.
Approval today.
Because I think that is the one thing, those dumpsters, they pick them up so early, and it is so loud, that process of scooping them up and dumping them. And if it's across open space, I think it's just...
Yeah. We'll look. I don't want to change anything about this application, but...
I know you've met your requirement. You're
Right.
60 feet, and it's just that what's between you and them is just open ground,
Right.
the detention pond or whatever, so... Is there anybody else here today who wanted to be heard on this item? Commissioners, do we have any questions of our applicant? Any comments? Or if not, I'll take a motion.
I make a motion to approve PUD SP 1666A.
Second.
I have a motion and a second to approve the specific plan for PUD SP 1666A. Cast your votes, please. It is approved.
Item 5 is an application for a specific plan located at 1140 Northwest 63rd Street.
Once again, David Box, 522 Colcord Drive, here on behalf of the applicant. Also with me are two representatives from Higgs Development who will be developing this multifamily property. This is, I think, an exciting application. It's one that has been years in the making. Commissioner Powers would have been involved in the PUD process years ago, and this spent a lot of time getting finalized entitlements in place. We're there now. This is, I believe, the third or fourth specific plan application that you as a commission will have seen. You'll recall the buildings that exist there at the corner of 63rd and Grand, that being the southeast corner. which are 2 separate restaurants, one of which I believe is Torchy's Tacos, which is now, as of last week, I'm told, open. So this is the latest step in the series of steps required for development of this parcel. So what we have here is the multifamily component of this development. At the time that we went and got the site rezoned, we allowed for up to 500 units. This is a project that only has 326 compared to what could be built. And at the time, we had some flexibility that we granted ourselves as it relates to parking. Back in those days, we did not have a commission that was as flexible as it related to parking. Commissioner Highsmith, others are constantly asking, why do we need so much parking? Can we do less? So what we've provided in this specific plan is a very detailed analysis of why we are providing the parking we're providing, and an analysis of what that means nationwide on other Hines projects, as well as what it means compared to other similar projects here in Oklahoma City. So it is a PUD that is fully compliant with, or excuse me, a specific plan that's fully compliant with the PUD in place. I do want to address one issue that Commissioner Powers raised. There was a question. I'm going to hand out the PUD. There was a question raised by Commissioner Powers about what was provided and or shown during the time of the PUD application. I went back, pulled my files, spoke with staff, and what you will see in the PUD that was approved is we provided no elevations. At the time, my client was the owner of the land. We did not have a developer in place, so we were hesitant to provide elevations. But I do want you to focus, if you turn to the last page of this PUD that was approved, what you will see is the site plan that we put forth at the time. And what you will see is along the eastern portion of the site is where we put the parking garage. The question raised by Ms. Powers was the placement of the parking garage. So I want to address 2 things as it relates to the parking garage before I turn it over to Mr. Darcy to talk about the project. So what you'll see is the parking garage was always contemplated on that eastern side. At the time, what you'll see is along Western Avenue, you'll see a little green ball field almost. That was, at the time, the Chesapeake intramural field. As you're probably aware, there are plans moving forward for a hotel to be built there. And so although the parking garage will be located along the eastern side of our site, it is not along Western Avenue. That green ball field will be developed as a hotel, thereby screening from view any view of the parking garage up and down Western Avenue. So it is important to note also, if you look at the PUD as it relates to screening, the PUD is specific in that at 9.13, it says screening shall not be required in this PUD. So no screening is required in the PUD. We believe that the location of the garage is the best possible location based upon the development. But I do want to have Mr. Darcy come walk you through the project, through the design, and answer any questions that you might have. So with that, if there are no questions of me, I will turn it over to Mr. Darcy. Thank you.
Do we have any questions of Mr. Fox before he sits down? Mr. Darcy, go ahead, please.
Thank you. Thank you very much. My name is Tom Darcy, 1025 Miami Road, Wilmette, Illinois. And thank you very much for the opportunity to present to you here this afternoon. So I'm going to be talking to you about our project, the residence. Oh, thank you. Up and down. Residence at Class and Curve, that is a placeholder name. We actually met with Ghost, which is a marketing firm here on Broadway and Automobile Alley this morning, and we'll be moving forward with a name and a marketing campaign here shortly. Sorry, how do I make it go up? Oh, thank you. So, Mr. McHenry and I are with a firm called Hines. We're a privately held, family-run firm. We've been in business about 62 years, I believe. We're headquartered in Houston. We work out of the Midwest office and have projects around the Midwest. You may or may not know that we've actually been working in Oklahoma City since 2010. So we were involved in the development of the Devon Energy Center, as also the Bank of Oklahoma headquarters building at 499 Sheridan. As a practice, as you can see on the screen up here, we're involved in office, retail, industrial, and residential around the United States. This is just an example. I'm sure everybody here is very familiar with this building. but it was a great honor to be able to work on it, as well as the myriad gardens across the street. Thank you. And then this is the Bank of Oklahoma Tower that we completed about 2 years ago. This project we were very excited to be a part of. It is, we think of it as sort of the donut in the hole. It's the final completion, or almost the final completion, of a wonderful mixed-use plan that Washington Prime Group now is the master developer of. As you can see from the site plan above, this is a wrapped product around the, I don't have a pointer, but at the bottom of the site plan here, coming in on Chesapeake, is where we're going to have our main entrance, our leasing office. The garage actually has 2 access points. One will be a right-hand turn off of Chesapeake. The other will be coming in off of an existing curb cut on 63rd Street. So I believe the only 2 pieces that are left in this overall master plan is the hotel that David referenced earlier, which we are not a part of, and then Washington Prime has some retail envisioned on the northern boundary along 63rd Street. The 2 open area courtyards that you see in the center, one is a triangular open space, and then the second to the north is an open pool deck area and entertainment area. So overall, as was previously mentioned, we're 326 units and 533 parking spaces. So I'll pause here and see if anybody has any questions they'd like to ask of us.
Commissioners? I think we're all pretty excited about this. It's been a long time in the process, and I assume this means that you've settled your litigation, does it?
Thank you. Yes, we are too. We've been working at this for about a year, and I know there's been a couple of people that have swung at this pitch, but we're confident that we can go forward. We're actually have all of our equity raised and in the process of closing our construction loan. Our plan, just from a scheduling standpoint, is actually to break ground in the middle of April, subject to your approval, of course, is to break ground in the middle of April. And from that point forward, our first units will be delivered in 16 months. So we're talking, mid to 2021 will be our first rentals. So thank you very much.
Thank you.
To answer your question, yes, it wasn't settled. It was resolved favorably.
Commissioners, do we have any comments, questions, concerns? I'm actually pleased that we're ending up with a little less density for this area. I mean, it may not be terribly, significant, but I think it'll give it a little bit better feel.
Yeah, and you'll recall, there was frankly widespread support from the neighbors, save for one person, for what this project meant, both the residential piece as well as the restaurants and associated retail that would come. So,
I also liked the triangle, so I'm surprised by the class and curve connection, but I suppose that's a branding thing and probably,
right.
Yeah. So this is my ward. I'd make a motion if I could, but I can't, so.
I'll motion to approve PUD SP 1592A.
Second.
I have a motion and a second to approve item number 5. Cast your votes, please.
thank you.
It is approved.
Item 6 has been withdrawn. Item 7 is an application to rezone 1620 North Blackwelder Avenue from SPUD 942 to SPUD 1162.
How's it going, Jeff Struble, 1111 Northwest 15th Street. Back again on this. We've, removed the Airstream off this project to make it a little easier, and so we're trying to get this up and going. I'm here to answer any questions.
I do have a question about this, but it's really sort of more for staff, I guess. I don't quite understand the zoning that it has currently does not permit lodging, which I don't understand to start with, but let's just take that as a given. And then it went to Board of Adjustment, and they approved it for short-term rental for 2, but not 4, and drew some sort of a distinction there. And can somebody explain that to me? Maybe I should ask Commissioner Privet.
Well, it's fairly new for the Board of Adjustment, too, and they've been a little inundated by the home sharing applications. I think, too, they're very conscious of not wanting to inundate one area with too many, and they just felt like, well, if we want more than two, we think it should go back to Planning Commission and go through a rezoning process and ultimately council.
It just kind of felt more of like a hotel type thing, I think, going on. And I didn't necessarily disagree with not approving it, but these are weird. I mean, everyone we go about different, and we still haven't really got a good handle on it.
So let me ask then, just as a, we don't need to spend a lot of time on this. In a fourplex, if you live in one of them, then are the others, is that considered living on site, or is it really defined in a way that it's like, I live in this bedroom and I can rent out that bedroom? I mean, would residents on site in one unit of 4 qualify it, but?
Yes.
It would, okay. Well, I think this is a perfect place for something like this, so I don't have any problem with that. Do we have any?
I would echo that. I mean, if you're familiar with property, well, first of all, Jeff, I might ask, what properties that surround this do you own?
Everything. The block.
That's what I thought.
Yeah.
So, I mean, not only does the applicant own the land, but if you're familiar with the property around it, it's business and parking lot. I don't see this as disruptive at all to any of the local residences. So I, too, fully support it. That's my 2 cents. I'll be ready to make a motion.
Oh, I did have one comment on page 3 of the staff report talking about site-proof screening. Among the descriptions of the wall are included chain link, which is a no-go for me. It's not site-proof, and it's not privacy, and it's, it doesn't fall into that category as far as I'm concerned, so I would like to see that stricken. But and then a question I guess I had on that same list of things. It talks about access, and it says access to the site is from the parking lot to the south. Are we talking about vehicular access to the site? Is from the parking lot to the site?
Right. There's, okay. I mean, on the front, there's an accessible ramp and a courtyard on the, I guess that'd be the west side of the property. And then there's a parking in the back and on the side, the east and south side.
And I guess I have one other comment or question, and this may be as much for staff as for you. Under the development regulations, architecture, it says existing building to remain, and then it says future development meet the requirements of urban design district. So does that place any limitation on the ability to remove the building? Could he tear it down tomorrow? Or does it limit, to damage or destruction or?
A demolition would have to be approved by Urban Design Commission.
A demolition permit was removed?
Would have to be approved by Urban Design.
Okay, all right. Commissioners?
If there's no further comments, I make a motion to recommend approval on Spud 1162.
Second.
I have a motion and a second to approve item number 7. Cast your votes, please. It is approved.
Thank you very much.
Item 8 is an application to rezone 2117 Southwest 55th Street from C3 to SPUD 1192.
Good afternoon. Mark Grubbs, 1800 South Sarah Road, on behalf of the applicant. What you have before you today is a spud for a piece of property located at Southwest 55th, just west of Penn. This actually came before this commission not long ago for a straight R4 zoning, which was approved by this commission to allow for multifamily. After that was approved by this commission, it did not go on as they realized they couldn't meet their setback requirements to build what they want. After that, they met with myself. We wrote a spud to allow for that multifamily use. and it would, their long-term goal is to, currently the Twilighter Club sits on there, on the front of that property, and so as soon as that goes away, that use would no longer be permitted, and it would be replaced with that R4 out front. So there is one TE regarding the height of a 15-foot sign. I agree to that so long as we could modify that to state that the existing sign for the Twilighter Club, if it doesn't meet that 15-foot, could remain intact until that use goes away, and then I would agree with that TE. So I'll be happy to answer any questions.
Is there some actual plan for the Twilight Club to go away, or are we just talking theoretically?
The owners do not want to operate that business any longer. They currently have a manager of that property that not quite ready to retire, but when they do, the full intention is for that Twilighter Club to go away, yes. They don't want to demo it and put her out of a job today, but so there is full intentions for it to go away.
So foreseeable future, but no actual scheduled time.
They mentioned a year and a half to me, so.
Okay, just curious. Commissioners?
Do I?
I don't have anyone signed up to speak. Is there anybody else who wants to be heard on this item? No, I'm sorry.
Do I interpret this correctly that the entire exterior is going to be panel metal?
That is the proposed, yes, that is the proposed material for that.
This would be the first time in 2 years that I've made a comment on architectural appearance or anything like that, but is that, I mean, code allows for an all-metal exterior like that?
If approved within the Spud, it would.
But otherwise it would not?
I'm not an architect, so.
I'm glad you asked this question because, we have this architectural metal thing. It's sort of.
It would be allowed?
Yeah. Just commercial and office districts prohibit the use of exterior metal. So for residential uses, metal can be used.
I cannot find an objective basis by which to question that, but that seems like something we should talk about with our code review.
As the only architect on the commission, I will say that it's not the material, it's how you use it. Having said that, I understand that there's probably not a lot of confidence in the public in how architects tend to use these products. But I don't think that we should stop necessarily somebody from doing it. I'd love to use metal panels on my project. I think they're cost-effective and a great product. They last forever. It's hard for me to throw stones here.
I think beauty is in the eye of the beholder. So.
Well, yeah, I think the problem is, just the idea of a metal exterior sort of, churns up thoughts of star metal buildings and that sort of thing. Whereas when you speak to people who are using it, for architectural design, they're quick to point out that it's not anything like that. The question is, how do we differentiate? How do we know it's not anything like that? And my own sense of it is that it's kind of fuzzy in terms of how we know.
Just as an example, I would point out that the new Monarch building built in Midtown, Class A office, is mostly metal panel other than the glass. So there's good examples out there. Not saying this is guaranteed to be one of them.
As I said, if code allows it, code allows it. I've never seen one come in where the entire exterior was proposed to be panel metal. So that was my curiosity question, but code allows it, code allows it. So.
I'm glad you raised the question, though. Commissioners? Anyone else? Do I have a motion?
I'm happy to make one if nobody else wants. You wanted just to confirm it, you wanted the TE to reflect the existing sign. That was what you had requested, that the existing sign would be allowed to remain, but new signage would comply with the TE. You were comfortable with that?
Correct.
Any objections to that?
I thought it was the sign would remain as long as that use remains.
As long as that use remains, but that use goes away once that use is abandoned, it goes away.
So how do we want? I mean, how do we want to structure that language? I guess we want to tie it to the use. That sign to the use. Okay. Okay. So I'll make a motion to recommend approval of SPD 1192, subject to the technical evaluation, amending TE1 to say that the existing sign shall be allowed to remain so long as the C3 use continues.
I would be a little more specific than that. I think as long as the club remains in place.
Can we be that specific? Okay, we can. So long as
its use unit drinking establishment would no longer be permitted after that goes away. We've stated that in the Spud. So.
You did? Yeah. It's outlined in the MDS?
Yeah.
Okay. So existing sign to remain so long as the club continues in use. After that, new signage shall be limited to 15 feet in height and 150 square feet.
Second.
I have a motion and a second to approve item number 8 with the modification to the technical evaluation to allow the existing signage to remain as long as the club remains in place. Cast your votes, please. It's approved.
Item 9 is an application to rezone 1206 Exchange Avenue from I-2 to R4.
Commissioners, Bert Belanger, 105 East Sheridan, for the applicant. This is a straight rezoning. This is a 14-acre tract that's sort of catty-corner to the farmer's market. It's been zoned I-2 forever. It's in the Scenic River Overlay Design District, and we've had one hearing with them. Of course, we'll have to go back to them with respect to specific designs, but this is a straight R4 zoning request. Be happy to answer any questions.
Bert, can I ask, are there specific plans?
No, there are not.
What is that?
Pardon me?
Are there specific plans, like are you working on specific plans?
We are working on specific plans, but the property right now is owned by a trust with whom we've contracted. It's a charitable trust, and we're working to attract and recruit a couple of different apartment developers, and it's going to be probably a year-long process, and obviously don't want to hamstring them with respect to specific design or site configuration. This used to be the switchyard, I understand, for the old street trolley system, and it's been cleaned up and been was in the Drabeck family ownership for some time, and they created a trust for the benefit of a couple of nonprofits. So it's been sort of fallow for some time.
Well, I have to say this just seems like an absolutely crazy thing to do to me, but I assume you have more vision than I have in that regard, and that perhaps by the time you're ready to actually develop it, the area will have caught up to you a bit. I mean, it seems it's a very much a leap of faith, but I think with the Riverfront Trust in charge of the, design elements of it, and given all that's going on in the area, I suppose it's at least, within the realm of possibility.
I couldn't be more excited. I think as much as we've cut off the area of the farmers market, I think we've done a few things that have stubbed our toes on the redevelopment of that area, and I absolutely believe that what's required there is rooftops, bedrooms.
I do too.
And I think, to put it one way, I think you're doing the Lord's work, bringing people down here, helping out what's going on in that, in that district. So
I will take that. I appreciate that, Commissioner. I do have a long background in multifamily, and I think that this is going to be an excellent site for this use, and I think this is going to really prove to be probably the southern gateway to the west side of downtown.
Agreed.
I don't have anyone signed up to speak. Do I have a motion?
Nobody else has any comments, then I'd love to make a recommendation to approve PC 10641.
Second.
I have a motion and a second to approve item number 9. Cast your votes, please. It is approved.
Thank you very much.
Good luck to you.
Thank you. Dan.
Item number 10 is a preliminary plat of Summit Ridge Villas located east of Broadway Extension and north of East Hefner Road, as well as variances to Section 5.4.2.E.5 of the subdivision regulations in TE3.
Good afternoon. Once again, David Box here on behalf of the applicant. Also with me is Mark Grubbs, the civil engineer for this project. This is a site that is zoned R4. We are platting it here with a preliminary plat, but we're planning to develop it at a level of density for duplexes. So we're really, we're developing it at basically half the density that could be otherwise developed pursuant to the R4 zoning. As staff said, there are 4 TEs, all of which we agree to. TE number 3 does require a variance. The variance is to allow the addresses to be addressed off of the private drive rather than 118 lots all addressed off of the arterial, which would presumably be a problem for, I don't know, Amazon, the Postal Service, all those things. Staff does support the variance at page 8 in the staff report, where it says, staff agrees that due to the number of lots included in the subdivision, addressing off the intersecting streets would not be desired in this case. So, again, it's about half the density that could otherwise be developed. We do agree to all the TEs, but we do need a variance on TE number 3. Be happy to answer any questions you might have.
I don't have anyone signed up to speak. Is there anyone here who wishes to be heard on this item? Commissioners?
I do have a question.
Yes, sir.
In relation to this. I noticed that several of the properties just south are zoned R4, but they appear to be single family.
Mm-hmm.
Is that how they're built out currently? Is that single family? Do you know?
Yes, sir. It's a bit strange in that you've got the predominant land use in there is R4, and there are some R4 apartments that have been built, but there's also some single family that's been built pursuant to the R4 district. Just like here, we're actually going to be developing a duplex product. R4 in the code actually contemplates duplex development. So, yeah.
That has to do just with density primarily.
Density, lot sizes, yes.
Okay.
I guess the one bit of reassurance I would like about this item is just that the parking is going to work. I mean, that there's actually room for people to maneuver and park, and it seems really, really tight. And
Sure. That was a question. We found multiple other examples where this exact same type of development has been platted in a similar way. Mr. Grubbs has been involved in several. We're not aware of any parking problems as it relates to those types of developments. So we believe we have the space necessary to do anything we need to do within the plat.
Okay. I do have someone who is now signed up to speak. Mr. Washington.
Yes. 2900 Northeast 18th Street. This is simply a flagrant disregard of the citizens who live in this area. That's all a plot and design for the most part to continually to come in and disrupt Ward 7, simply because they think we don't have any speakers or formidable leaders like myself. Well, a lot of y'all been introduced to me already, but I don't know much about this man. I don't understand that whoever he think he is, his law firm is, that they can just come in and represent who they want and disregard who they want, Well, we're not having that anymore. Now, this is all a front designed to flagrantly disregard the citizens who wish not for this development to occur, and I am here to speak for them, being a political activist for Ward 7. I do not discriminate. You can be orange, pink, purple, green, or gray. I am still that guy. So again, this is all a big money thing. It's money versus those who don't have it. And he's trying to disregard.
Mr. Washington, can I ask you, are you aware of citizens who are in opposition to this item?
I'm not. I'm saying me. I'm saying me because I don't like this man, not per se, but his law firm.
Okay. Can I
Simple
ask
as
you, Can I ask you, please, just give me a minute here. Mr. Box, have you had any contact from
No, didn't speak to nobody.
your neighbors?
None.
No, you hadn't, because I already studied it.
Notice went out, my belief,
No.
that Mr. Washington resides nowhere near this.
Ward 7, I can be on the moon.
Have you reached out to your neighbors in this area, or have they reached out to you?
He hasn't informed anybody, ma'am.
So
Excuse me.
they've been reached out to insofar as staff sent notice of the hearing. We have not specifically reached out, and we have not heard any protests.
Thank you. Please, go on.
Yeah, now, again, that's what I'm saying, that underhanded, slick, slimy move that this law firm is...
I'm not going to sit here and...
This is I have right on the First Amendment. Would you tell this man something? I said a slick, slimy move that man's law firm is putting down.
I'm not going to listen to that either. If you have something specific about this project...
I just said, disregarding that law firm, that was a flagrant disregard for the citizens. He's making his move down, didn't give the proper notice to the citizens who needed to be heard. I had some people ask me to come in, and they know I'm going to handle the situation for it. They asked me to speak. I'm in Ward 7. I didn't know anything about it. And if it went out...
Please. Notice is set out by statute.
Right.
Let me ask staff, did notice go out in this case? Staff, please. Did notice go out in this case?
Okay, but now, once again, notice what I'm trying to say, regardless, the citizens have a right to be informed of what's planned. Okay, even though notices went out, I mean, the common...
Well, that's why we're here.
That's what I'm trying to tell you now. That's why I'm speaking. I don't believe...
been zoned R4?
I have. Decades.
Okay.
That's what he says. Decades. Where's the proof at?
Well, it's zoned properly. This is a plat. It's not a rezoning.
Oh, okay. It's not good. Well, thank you, Mr. Craven. You've been a good man. But what I'm trying to say, man, the citizens deserve better. Not by some opulent, I'm the big Don Dada. I'm going to put a notice out, but I'm not going to go and talk to y'all to see what y'all think about what we're trying to do. Regardless of the fact... Wait a minute now.
Your opposition is duly noted. Thank you.
I understand that, ma'am. I'm trying to show you something else. That this is something that the citizens deserve, you people protecting their interests out. Now, regardless of the fact some notice, when you put some notice out, not everybody reads the papers or whatever. Not everybody goes to the websites. Okay, I understand all that. But now with me, had it been me and I wanted to do something, I'm not going to go slink-a-slink-like. To go beyond the table.
Notice goes out by mail.
And so you're saying residents got theirs by mail then? Is that what you're saying?
Yes.
Okay,
residents are notified by mail.
Okay, well, I'll check on that for you.
All property owners within 300 feet of the outward boundary of the property.
Okay.
So the fact that there is not anyone other than yourself here today, anyone who lives in the area that's in opposition to that,
right,
to what's being proposed, is one factor that we will take into consideration.
Absolutely, ma'am. Please do, because I'm getting down your hair right here. No pun intended. I don't have any much. Anyhow, like I was saying, though, let us see that we are taxpaying citizens.
If you think that there is opposition amongst property owners in this area, then between now and City Council, I would advise you.
It's a plat.
I'm sorry, it's a plat. So. We're it.
Okay, now not only what you just said, you got to realize one more thing too. Now, I believe that this proposal should be held up for the sake of those concerned. Me being a political activist for all and any and everybody, a child, older, middle-aged, whatever the case may be, I think that I am their voice, and we are in opposition to it simply because no one came down. Don't make me believe that everybody, this is right, what y'all doing.
I think we understand your position.
Okay, so...
Thank you.
Hasta la vista, and I will be back, law firm.
Thank you. I don't have anyone else signed up to speak. Commissioners, do we have questions, comments, concerns?
Comments. Has this, as far as we know, the area has been zoned R4, is that correct? It's already been that way for as long as we know. So really the only thing we're doing is adding more multifamily developments in Ward 7, is that correct?
Yes, but frankly what we're doing is we're cutting in half the density that could otherwise be built without a plat.
Right. Sounds good to me. If there are no further comments, I'm ready to move to approve item 10.
I I do have, I guess, one other thing I would like to ask you about. Do I understand that this is going to be gated?
Yes.
And so maybe my question is really not so much to you as to staff. I think we probably need to develop some kind of, I don't know, special criteria or scrutiny that we give to these things. I hear from Public Works that these gated communities become issues down the road. Not now, maybe 20 years, maybe 25 years. The ability of an area like this to really take responsibility financially for the maintenance of what are roads. I mean, we're calling them driveways here, but that is really a significant financial undertaking. And I just question the wisdom of us. We've had a number of groups come before us in neighborhoods with private roads that have already become an issue. And I just question, the wisdom of allowing these kinds of private road developments. So that's all I have to say about that.
I mean, is that something that we should be discussing as part of the whole revision of the code, or just that strategy?
I think probably so. I think probably so. I mean, obviously, we're not going to, deny this one on this basis. It's something that's permitted, and I assume that you've been all through with emergency services, your access, and that they're agreeable with the southern access point and so on. So, it's not that we're going to deny this particular one on this basis, but I do think it is something that we need to keep in mind as we're reviewing these.
I'll mention just briefly that Plan OKC does contemplate that, and that is definitely something we will look at as part of the code update. Not only these, but other common areas as well. There's been a concern for many years about the ongoing maintenance of various kinds of common areas, whether it be private drives or drainage areas or open space.
No. Okay, so do I have a motion?
Yes. First, I'd like to move to approve the variance to section 5.4.2.E.5 of the subdivision regulations.
Second.
I have a motion and a second to approve the variance to the subdivision regulations allowing addressing or change of the name. What is it exactly?
It's allowing the addressing to be off of the drives.
Off the drives.
Rather than one address with individual units.
So I have a motion and a second on the variance. Cast your votes, please. It is approved.
Thank you.
I move approval of item 10.
Second.
No, it's not separate. I have a motion and a second to approve item number 10. Cast your votes, please.
Thank you.
It is approved.
Item 11 is an application to rezone 3237 Northwest 192nd Street from PUD 1686 to SPUD 1194.
Good afternoon, Commissioners. Ernie Ish, 14848 Bristol Park Boulevard, representing Thomas and Gina Bowling. Mr. and Mrs. Bowling are here. You saw this about a year ago as a planned unit development. After lengthy negotiations with the Corps of Engineers over a pond and a drainage area through there, we've come back to you with this Spud to develop a garden office project around that pond, and we would ask for your approval. I'd be happy to answer any questions.
I don't have anyone signed up to speak on this item. Is there anyone here who wishes to be heard? Commissioners?
Mr. Ish, are you in agreement with technical evaluations? There are three. You're in agreement with those?
Yes, we agreed to the technical evaluations.
Okay. Any comments from commissioners? I'll make a motion to recommend approval for SPUD 1194.
Second.
I have a motion and a second to approve item number 11 Would you cast your votes, please? It is approved.
Item 12 is the preliminary plat of Hollandaid Business Park, located, north of Northwest 192nd Street and east of North Portland Avenue.
Again, Ernie Ish representing Mr. and Mrs. Bowling, and we concur with the technical evaluations. This is a companion to the Spud that you just addressed.
I was a little unsure about this, whether it does or does not require variances.
We're agreeing to meet the requirements stated, so variances are not required.
So it's one-way only, is your point?
I'm sorry?
The street is one-way only, is you're in agreement that it's
No,
good?
we'll, in our final plat, we'll widen that to
24.
be two.
Got it. Okay. All right. So then the variance would not be required?
Correct.
Any discussion on this item from commissioners?
I don't have anyone signed up to speak. Is there anyone who wishes to be heard? If not, I'll take a motion.
Make a motion to approve the application for C-7119.
Second.
I have a motion and a second to approve item number 12. Cast your votes, please. It is approved.
Thank you, Commissioner.
Item 13 is consideration of a resolution to change the name of Northeast 25th Street, extending west from North Bryant Avenue to Highland Avenue to Glendale Higgs Street.
Is our applicant present?
I'm Deacon James Richardson, and I'm a member of the Church of the Living God. And our pastor there is Overseer Glendale Higgs, and I'll give you a little bit of background about him. He's been a pastor at our church for 32 years, and he's been in the ministry for over 50 years. And he was appointed area supervisor in 2011 over a 6th district. And in 2013, he became an overseer, and he was over the District 6 at that time. And then in 2016, the districts were split, and he became overseer of the 3rd district. And we're asking that you consider changing Northeast 25th Street to Glendale Higgs Street in honor of him.
I do have several people signed up to speak on this item. Is it Chandra Triplett? Would you come forward, please?
Good afternoon. I'm Chandra Triplett, 15208 Himalaya Ridge.
Would you pull that microphone just a little closer, please? Thank you.
15208 Himalaya Ridge, Edmond, Oklahoma. And I stand on behalf of the property owners and residents that use Northeast 25th as their address. And they are opposing the resolution because they will have to go in and change all of their legal documents, anything that has the Northeast 25th address as their address to Glendale Higgs. My mother and father built their home there in 1966, and Northeast 25th has been their address for that many years. And on behalf of those property owners and residents, they disagreed with the fact that that street name would be made because the church actually addresses 2617 North Bryant. The church will not have to change anything, no stationery, no nothing. There's no way that that church is going to be affected by the name change. All of the residents that use Northeast 25th will be affected, and currently there is a sign above Northeast 25th, the green Oklahoma City sign. There is a sign that says Honorary Glendale Higgs, and those residents believe that That should be enough to honor their pastor.
Thank you. Do you have any questions of Ms. Triplett? Thank you for coming down. Mr. Washington.
Well, now this is quite a surprise for me. I'm really stumped slightly. I've never been a man hard for words. However, we must consider, as I've just spoken to you people about in my previous statements, we have to realize that you have two balancing beams here. One where the lady's information has been going to the addresses with the current name, and honoring this admirable man that this gentleman spoke about. Throughout the ages and centuries, as many years as I've been old, I'm almost 63 by the way, I've noticed that name changes have been significantly recognized for those who have made a significant difference in their communities. We have Cleverlupa Corridor. We have John A.R. Reed streets, and on and on and on and on. The redirecting or rewriting and refilings of paperwork is something that history reminds us that all of us must go through, whether it's a doctor bill, whether it's part of moving into a new address, or whatever the case may be. So in this case, I believe that this man here, again, I don't know much about him, but I take the word of this man here, and then that, as the lady stated, is an honorary name set up already, so that tells me that someone already, even before he got in here, recognized the great contributions that this gentleman has made. This, I don't know if I say it right, Glendale Higgs Street, Pastor Glendale Higgs. With that, I believe that bigger than just a name change, a man can be recognized for, obviously, the civil rights struggle, for the great works and contributions he's made in history, for all the accolades. Obviously, again, I don't know much about the gentleman. I'm kind of upset at myself for not knowing, but I probably will after this. In that light, I do believe then that this resolution should be approved. Again, I know I'm not going to be a fan favorite of many for saying that. Again, not everybody's going to be satisfied no matter what you do. So in that regard, and in closing then, I live on the northeast side in that area, and I do believe that name should be given consideration for the many things, again, this man has done. Thank you all very much.
Thank you. Commissioners, I would note, and I guess I'll make reference to the staff report for those of you who don't have one in hand. Change of the name was actually recommended for approval by the Planning Commission on September 2017, which surprises me. I didn't think we had been doing that for quite a long time. But when it went forward to council, council initiated a moratorium on street name changes while they developed a policy or reviewed the policy that was already in place, probably is more accurate, is it not? And so they have adopted a policy whereby these kinds of honorariums can be awarded to folks without changing the name of the street. We actually have a street naming policy, and it's set forth in the staff report. The most significant one, I think, probably that comes to bear in this particular case has to do with that the person is someone of national or international significance. We used to just be flooded with these kinds of requests. There are I was raised as a Catholic, and it was always a thing that priests didn't stay very long in one place. But in Northeast Oklahoma City, there are a plethora of churches where pastors, devote their lives to a particular congregation. And it's, understanding that people would want to honor that, and street name changing kind of developed as a way to do that. But it became, cumbersome and difficult. And so council adopted a policy some time ago that requires that persons whose efforts are national or internationally recognized can be considered for street change names. Even there, though, as you'll remember, especially down in Bricktown for artists in the music business and so forth, we tend to select streets that don't really go anywhere, that are really just little segments of streets and so on, because it is quite a cumbersome and difficult thing to change an address on just a portion of a street. So they adopted this honorary street sign program to allow post-top street markers, signs to be placed above the standard street signs. And as I understand it, that has already been done in this case. So I want you to understand that we are very much in favor of recognizing Glendale Higgs and his contribution. But the question is really whether an additional step needs to be taken or whether the honorarium that has been extended currently is sufficient. So I think that's probably the discussion that we're going to have.
Is there anybody else signed up to speak?
No, those are the only two people I have signed up. Is there anybody else who wants to be heard on this topic? Come give us your name and address, please. Come to the microphone.
Okay.
And
my name is Lonzetta Nolan. I live in Oklahoma at 2813 Northeast 25th. I have been living there for 54 years. I am 85 years old, and I need the consideration of you all so that I will not have to change all my credentials. Everything will have to be changed. Passports, everything will have to be changed, and that means something. And if you don't, you know, the saying is, if you never walk in a mile in a man's shoes, you don't know how it is. So you all would not understand because you're not in my position. So I just don't want to go through all of these changes that I have to at this age.
I do understand. We have had people come to us and talk about this before. It is a significant thing to have to change your address,
Completely.
Especially when you're explaining to somebody that you haven't moved. You're still where you always were, but you just have a different address now. So,
I completely agree. I think that at the very least, and with all due respect to Mr. Higgs, without you at least convincing the neighbors who will be directly impacted, I can't support this proposal. My process question is we're just making a recommendation, is that correct, to the City Council?
I believe so.
Yeah,
I believe it will
just
go on
wanted
to
to confirm
council.
that.
I did do a petition also. I went around and we talked to the people in the neighborhood, and they signed a petition saying that it was okay. But I understand what they're saying. But
do you have any neighbors who will be directly impacted by the change who are in support of this? Because it sounds like, based on the letters that I've received and the statements that we've heard today, that's not true.
Well, this is a petition I have here that the people signed. So,
was it anybody whose address would have to change as a result?
Yeah, I guess it would. Yeah, they're on the Northeast 25th Street.
Because if I'm correct, it's 4 houses. Is that right? At least 3 of them would have to have 25th as the address. One of them probably has Bryant.
Yeah, I think one did. Yeah.
And so it sounds like at least 2 of them are opposed. Well, I had 3. All 3 are opposed, sir. If there's no further discussion, go ahead.
Can I ask one question? Yep. Sorry. Deacon Richardson, you'd brought this application previously. It was actually my first planning commission meeting, as it were. And
well, this year I did. Last year, the evangelist Stafford did it, and then they had the moratorium, and then we.
Right. Well, that was my first meeting, and Lee Cooper was sitting to my right instead of Commissioner Pennington. But so I remember the case at least vaguely, and so then the City Council did create this program to essentially allow the honorarium to exist above the street name. I'm curious just why for you that is not. I mean, does it seem like that's not enough, or is there? I want to hear from you why that's. Why you came back to seek the street name change again?
Well, there's other pastors with street names. The street is named completely after them. I understand the honorary deal, but we just wanted to do the whole street for him.
I see.
The street has really not changed. It's just honoring the pastor. The name hasn't really changed.
I see. Okay. Just curious. Thank you.
Commissioners?
There's no further comment. I recommend that, I move to recommend that item 13 is not passed. What's the right phrasing? Denied. Can't use the right word.
It sounds harsh somehow.
Well, it does. I know. I'm trying not to phrase in the negative. Anyway.
Second.
Second.
I have a motion and a second to deny item number 13. Cast your votes, please. It is denied. With all due respect,
Item number 14 is an application to rezone 4225 West Memorial Road from SPUD 796 to SPUD 1184.
Good afternoon. Once again, David Box, 522 Colcord Drive, here on behalf of the applicant. The application before you is an SPUD that will add various uses as well as allow for an existing EMD billboard along the Turnpike to go from 300 square feet to 672 square feet. I am handing you out something that may look confusing because it's a staff report dated May 23, 2019. The reason I wanted to call your attention to this is, in my opinion, it is an identical fact pattern and application to what you are seeing before you today. In Spud 1121, I was coming before the Planning Commission on behalf of a different billboard company, but what we were doing there was taking O2 and C3 and adding uses, and specifically, if you turn to page 9 of the staff report for 1121, under the plan conformance considerations, what you will see is that I've highlighted proposes increasing the size of an existing non-accessory sign from 300 to 672 square feet. And in this instance, staff recommended approval of the SPUD. So fast forward from May, and I can report that after May, this did go to City Council sometime end of June, early July, and it was passed unanimously by the City Council. And so now we fast forward just about 6 months later, and on an almost identical fact pattern, staff has recommended denial. I've got a problem with that. I frankly think that is a bad position for the city to be putting themselves in when we are treating applicants and applications differently for no apparent reason. I'm at every city council meeting. I have not seen an application or a movement to revise the sign code, change the sign code. I have not seen any revisions or modifications to the comprehensive plan as it relates to these things. So what staff says on page 11 of the current staff report is that the comprehensive plan commits to updating the sign code to reduce visual impacts of signs to new standards for size, height, etc. Well, then I would say, go do it. But the city hasn't revised the sign code. We have the same sign code today that we had in May and July when the City Council, on an identical application, was told that it was in conformance with the comp plan, therefore recommended approval, and ultimately the city approved it. So here we're told that it doesn't conform with the comp plan. So I guess my question to staff is, what has changed from May 23rd to February 13th?
Well, I'll speak up a little bit. I appreciate this, and I'm pretty sure this is one that I voted for. But to me, you know, what's left out of this, right, is the actual property. What we see in these packets, right, are some area, some aerial that shows us a little bit of the character of the place. And at least for me as a commissioner, that matters. What surrounds the property, right?
Sure.
And so I think there's a big difference to me between this one and today's. And I'm not saying that necessarily, you know.
So to me, it's not a big difference. If you looked at the area at I-44 in Kelly, which is where Spud 1121 is, it's surrounded by office development. Along, I think it's 63rd Street there in Kelly, you have a series of commercial developments. And to the west of the sign is an existing single-family residential neighborhood. Here, frankly, it's a more commercialized corridor of the city. It's surrounded, with one exception, that being an apartment complex that exists to the east of the site. It is surrounded by medical, restaurant, office, and retail-type uses. It is a very commercialized corridor along the Kilpatrick Turnpike. Commissioner Clare did ask, what about those apartments? One of the things we're willing to commit to are the light shielding louvers that we've done now in several applications similar to this. I sent Commissioner Clare a demo video. You have a person in the industry on your commission who can talk to what those what the louvers do. But I don't see any difference except for this application is more commercialized.
Well, maybe we should ask that.
I'm not sure it's a development services issue.
But what got me was all the list of multiple uses that were being added to this one. The last one, I remember what the use was added a non-accessory sign though, wasn't it?
No, it's exact. So it was O2 and C3, and we added uses that were not allowed under the current zoning.
But what uses did we add? What uses do we add to 1121?
We added everything that's allowed in C3. A piece of that site is zoned O2. So what we did in 1121 is, frankly, more aggressive than what we're doing here. We added every single possible use under C3, and then the sign.
Well, wait a minute. I understand from the staff report that of the use units that are being added to what was permitted previously, building maintenance services, community recreation, and community services limited, which is essentially radio and telecommunication broadcasting. Is that correct, JJ? So everything else was essentially existing, which admittedly is one of the things in our staff report that's a little confusing because you don't know, but that's what, I mean, and this is a developed piece of property. There's an existing shopping center, there's a hotel behind it, there's no dirt here. They've basically packed as much on one lot as you can get, in my view. So these use units do not concern me in any way in terms of how it would impact the surrounding uses based on what exists there today. That ship sailed when they built the hotel, but it's an apartment complex next door which is similar in scale and size. I mean, it's recessed a little bit from this site, but it's very similar. So
here's what I have to say about this. You're very well able to represent your clients and make whatever arguments you want to make about this particular application. Every piece of ground is different. The idea that you're being damaged somehow by the fact that staff is taking a different position on this than they took on another one is falling on deaf ears as far as I'm concerned, including for the fact that I think they made a mistake the first time. So the fact that they're rectifying it now is not problematic for me.
Well, it's not just the first time. I could have brought about 6 or 7 other examples that we've done.
Okay, so 6 or 7 times. I do not agree with the idea of using PUDs or SPUDs to enlarge signs.
I understand. I understand what the chair's position on signs is. My only comment is I think you have to just stand up and take your licks on every case you come. I don't think you're going to be able to set some kind of a precedent that allows you to come in and get signs approved automatically because you've gotten them approved in the past. I'm not looking to do that. Mine is more fundamentally.
That's kind of what it sounds like to me.
No. I'm focused on why, if you're an applicant, if you're a citizen, if you're a property owner, and you're looking for guidance as to what are the policies of the city, how could you determine what the policies of the city are when you have conflicting staff reports on the same issue? I'm not saying what happens here or what happens at city council. That's a whole separate deal. But unless there's been a change in policy, what you're really saying is they have gotten it wrong time and time and time again, and now magically something happened and we've become enlightened, and now we got it right. Of course, we'd say the opposite. Like, we screwed it up here, because how could it be that for the last 7 times we were wrong, right? Can't be. But I'm not saying it sets precedent to what your vote has to be. I'm just saying it's an unfair treatment when there's been no change in the policy, there's been no change in the code. And I don't see any specific factors as to why it's different here.
I again think we should give the stage to staff to answer the question.
In our view, and I'll just quote from the staff report, there are a couple key issues here. The appropriate use of a PUD and a SPUD. So in the code it says that a PUD and a SPUD are appropriately used when flexibility is required. That is not allowed under the zoning code in return for coordinated development that provides greater public benefits as outlined in the purpose and intent. Goes on to say that a PUD and SPUD are design and planning tools that are not to be used to circumvent policies or used in lieu of seeking variances to regulations. To us, this just felt like a way to get a bigger sign and didn't meet the purpose of a PUD or a SPUD. So that was one of the main reasons. And in addition, what Plan OKC has to say about signs and billboards, yes, you're right. There is an intention to kind of look at that as part of the sign code and see what's appropriate, and that hasn't been done yet. But a PUD and a SPUD is a legislative action, and so we should take guidance from the comprehensive plan when it comes to doing that. So that is kind of the rationale for, and yes, everyone is different. Every situation is different. Context matters.
Yeah, fair enough. But, I mean, your comment that here we're simply trying to increase the size of the sign, your staff, the royal staff, whoever that is, in 1121 believed that to be the exact same purpose because you called it out specifically under the plan conformance considerations, yet still recommended approval.
Well, I wasn't involved at that time, and I can't answer for the planning commissioner staff at that point. But
it was this summer.
I do think, yeah, that was last summer. That wasn't our recommendation. That wasn't my recommendation. So,
understood.
But I do think, even looking at that and looking through that, it's a different case, it's a different context, it's a different location, and that all matters. If you think about what the council's considered recently on Hefner Parkway and the signage there, we have different regulations for billboards downtown than we do elsewhere. It matters a lot where you are in the city.
I think it matters that I'm going to have to disagree a little bit with our chair and with Commissioner Highsmith and, frankly, with planning staff, it looks like. I think it is very important that we provide objective standards and ordinances that the public, sign, construction property owners, et cetera, even protestants, know how to follow and can understand. A policy change is not a justification for me. I don't even know why you're using that word. Because
I said I'm not aware that there has been a policy change.
You said if there had been a policy change, that'd be one thing. No, it wouldn't change anything. What I want to understand about this is I drive this stretch of road every single day, at least twice, and there are no billboards there are no billboards west of this one between here and Council Road. That could be a zoning issue for parcels there. It could be that this area, just for whatever reason, has not yet been developed in that regard. But we need to be very careful that we don't make a policy change decision, that in fact we use our ordinances to dictate when these things require us to change. Otherwise, there are spacing requirements that exist, there are zoning requirements that exist. I think the real issue, if we're just being honest when I read the staff application, I think the real issue with this is that it seems like what happened was, best I can tell from the staff report because I wasn't involved, but when you read it, there was a sign built under the condition that when it would be developed, it would be removed. Then they came back. They were able to get it rezoned to allow it to exist, right? Now they've come back and they want to enlarge it. Well, you don't have to like the way that gets done, but I'm trying to find an objective way to view, because we see these applications, and they've come in and we've had these discussions about other billboards along I-44 and Southwest 15th. We've had discussions with billboards along I-44. We've had them on 235. And to me, I can't see what's different about this because we've had, that one on 44 was surrounded by houses. We recommended approval of it. The one at 235 there's nothing around it. So I'm in agreement that all these cases stand on their own. I don't think you can come in here and dangle I agree. A former SPUD in our face and say, you got to approve them all just like this one. But I am curious what the objective standards are by which we're recommending denial of this one, because that's what I need to understand, because it's kind of like the corrugated metal. That's like the worst idea ever, to build the building front out of metal. Repair one time and tell me that you don't feel differently. But if you can't find something objective in our code to not allow it, what are you supposed to do? Because you don't like it, you say no, you can't do that? That's not a good, that in and of itself is not good policy for a planning commission.
Yeah, and I honestly think these cases should be at the Board of Adjustment, but, they'd never get passed if they were at the Board of Adjustment either.
Well, having started at the Board of Adjustment, I agree with you, that's that catch-22. Well, this isn't really a proper use for SPUDs, but if it went to the Board of Adjustment,
laugh them out of the room.
So they've got to have a path to do this. That's more of that objective part of how do these things get evaluated properly. So these are within the standards. The separation requirements are met. It'd been approved once before by council. So what objectively can someone point to me and say, this is not a proper location for this billboard? That's what I want to hear.
So what our staff report, the objectivity that we based our recommendation on was based on the comprehensive plan, which commits to updating the sign code to reduce the visual impact of signs through new standards for the size, height, and number of signs and billboards. Plan OKC calls for the restriction of new billboards and for, well, et cetera, et cetera. So when we look at these things, it's to be objective, and the comprehensive plan is the place we go, because that was agreed upon by City Council, by the Planning Commission, and it applies across the board. So in our minds, you know, we wish that we would have said a little bit more and maybe explored this a little bit more in the comprehensive planning process, so there would be a little more guidance. But that's what we have. That's really the only thing we have to go on, and so that's kind of the standard we used. And when it comes to, you know, there's the sign code. Sign code is the sign code. What we're doing with this PUD or this SPUD is to change the code, to customize the code. So what applies in my mind is the city's policy document. So that's, to answer your question, that's kind of our perspective. From the objectivity perspective, that's how we judged it.
And under the plan conformance considerations, it says that the increase in size and height of the electronic display sign would have negative impacts on nearby residential and hotel uses due to the additional spill light. The increased size would also have a negative aesthetic impact on the corridor, which has no other billboards between Portland, Lake Hefner Parkway, and North MacArthur Boulevard. So,
but wait a minute.
There you go.
Well, I can speak to that.
Well, hang on a minute before you, because I know what you're going to say. But that is a byproduct of, in my guesstimation, that is a byproduct of zoning. If someone came in here and zoned it and the separation requirement were met, the idea that they're not going to request a non-accessory sign along the Kilpatrick Turnpike corridor is very unlikely. We're going to see that application at some point. And so, again, what will be, I'm all about using the comp plan as a guide. But when it comes to creating ordinances, there is a way to do that. The comp plan was adopted in 2015. This is 2020. If we have changes to the sign ordinance, we need to make them, or we need to use the ordinances we have to create these objective and so, Sarah, if you have color, you said you wanted, looked like you wanted to add something. I'm curious if there's more here than simply a comp plan saying that we really think we should look at these signs differently.
Well, two things. One is this was previously negotiated, so it's using the Spud process to renegotiate a sign. The other thing regarding zoning would be that the billboard requested is a C3 billboard. I mean, that's what they have now. In order to get the 672 square foot billboard, you would need I2. So if you would, I think I'd probably start with, is I2 an appropriate zoning district there, and kind of work backwards.
So wait, you're saying under C3, when they came in and they got it zoned the first time, that's the reason that 300 square foot billboard is constructed?
Well,
that's all that's allowed?
I'm saying that the size of billboard allowed within the C3 district is 300 square feet, EMD level 1, right? In order to enlarge that, you need at least the I2 district.
I think it's
or a Spud.
I think it's C4.
Or a PUD.
Or a Spud. I mean, it's or a Spud, right?
Okay, C4 or I2 or I3.
Or none of them, and you have a Spud, which is what we've done multiple times.
Except that a Spud is not an appropriate tool for this process. And I would have to say that the history here does matter somewhat. The Spud that was originally imposed on this property was very specifically negotiated, and the signage was very specifically negotiated out.
No, it makes me, I mean, do you agree with that assessment that C3 would have what allowed the 300 square foot billboard, but would have not allowed a 672 square foot billboard unless it had been negotiated at that time.
Yeah, the base zoning district of C3 allows 300 square feet.
I mean,
but to say that it requires C4 or I2, I think is wrong, because we see spuds and puds all the time that may allow retail sales.
No, you could come in here.
With no office base.
Yeah, the conundrum that I'm left with is this one: is that if they were coming in to do this anew, right? They were rezoning this property anew, and they were going to put a hotel behind a strip shopping center, and they wanted a billboard. How would you feel about it then? Is the way I think that's the proper way to look at it. But it is compelling to me that at the time that this was brought forward, they got a non-accessory sign that was 300 square feet because that's essentially what was allowed and could have been negotiated with the Planning Commission at that time. So it's essentially the same thing as going in and circumventing, going to the Board of Adjustment, getting a variance. That's why the Board of Adjustment typically throws its hands up on these deals, because it doesn't want to feel like it's, sort of going around the legislative process. So,
see, I would disagree with that because councils change, planning commissions change, policies change, right? So because you see things all the time that are rezoned from PUD whatever to PUD whatever you're seeking today. That doesn't mean that you're trying to go against the deal you made the first time. Development's pattern change, traffic counts change, things in the developed area change that might warrant something being approved today that otherwise wouldn't have been approved then. Or you have a different view on council, or you have a different view on planning commission. So just because you negotiated a deal, and I wasn't involved, but back in Spud 796, and you're forever bound by that, I would disagree. What you said, I think, is the way you look at it. If this was a brand new case, and there wasn't some history, would you think a billboard on a highway in the middle of a commercial development is appropriate? It's hard for me to say that it's not. And we're willing to add the louvers to shield from view. One of the aesthetic considerations is that. We're willing to do the louvers so that you won't see it or be blacked out from that angle.
there was another case that came before us, and I don't recall exactly when it was, but another billboard that would have been to the east of Portland on the south side of Memorial that backed up to the Quail Creek neighborhood that was proposed. That's been 2 years ago. And that discussion was pretty similar to this one. I mean, in the sense that that zoning had existed for a long time. It had been in place for a long time. They were coming in. The only thing they were trying to change is a sign, and that one was denied.
Well, so that was withdrawn. I was involved, and that actually dealt with covenants. That was when you were on the Board of Adjustment. And what we were seeking to do was to get a height variance, because at the time that the Spud and PUD, or whatever it was, PUD was negotiated, the fly bridge taking you from the Turnpike to State Highway 74 didn't exist. And so our justification for the hardship was that this unique circumstance existed where we negotiated back in the 80s a deal that was circumvented when you had a fly bridge. Now, that ultimately was withdrawn when we dug in and found that the covenants that existed on land did not allow for what we were seeking.
Yeah, but see, that's a good example of when something's changed that merits a revisit, where I think I certainly would have a lot more sympathy for a PUD being revisited, right? If we were to take that, if we were to make it a planning commission issue and not a board in that case, if you came in and said, here's what's changed about the area, that is the rationale for the need to come to you guys, because we can't go to Board of Adjustment. I think that creates a more sympathetic argument, at least as it relates to enlarging a sign.
I don't think we could go to the Board of Adjustment on this case. The position that legal staff has taken is that in PUDs and SPUDs, you can't go to the board to get a variance.
No, I understand that.
But this is our only vehicle.
I get it, but that would be a difference for me. I'm just curious what other people think, but it's I'm bothered by the lack of our objective ability to review this. This still feels in some regard really subjective, and that makes me uncomfortable because it means that the next one that comes in, we're going to have a different answer on that, and I don't like that lack of clarity for people who are in the development business, in the sign business, in the whatever business. That's not good policy. It's just not.
Well, and I
Here's
think
that word again.
I know. I don't like it. I don't like the word policy at all. It should be an ordinance is what it should be. That's how you avoid that, is you create an ordinance. And right now we have them.
We have one.
That's my point.
Does anybody know how many billboards are on Kilpatrick Turnpike currently? I don't.
East there is a lot.
East there is?
Yeah.
And there's more coming. I mean, one of the reasons that you didn't see any billboards till now, and I'm aware of several others that are coming, is you've got a scenario where it's a newly developed area, right? So you have new development coming, and I mean, Matt would know more than me, but especially as you get further to the west, the traffic counts haven't been there till perhaps in the last 5+ years, right? To justify the cost to go build the sign, because what you can rent them for has to justify building the thing in the first place. So it's not because there's some overlay prohibiting them, because there's not, right? It's because they haven't been justified till now.
I would say the zoning isn't there, or there would be permits out the wazoo to build billboards along.
Perhaps.
But there's nothing I-2 out there. There's very little. As competitive as the billboard industry is in Oklahoma City, that area's been gone over with a fine-tooth comb 27 times from Sunday. And if there was a place there for a billboard, it'd be there. My company would be there. Lamar would be there. Whistler would be there. I mean, somebody would be there because they'd have found it a long, long time ago. So there just is no place right now that would allow that.
I agree with everything that's been said about the fact that we lack clear criteria, and I think that's very important because we haven't given clear notice to developers about what their rights actually are. But today, we have to make a decision about this sign. So since we're talking about today, I think it's appropriate for us to consider whether at this current time, with the information we currently have, about the current development and the trends that we think are going to happen in this area, whether a sign of this size is appropriate. Because we don't have the objective criteria. I wish we had it, now we don't. So today, I would say this is totally appropriate. It's consistent with what the signs are that are totally to the east. As far as this previous Spud in 1121 that was in my ward, I approved it then because it's appropriate along the highway. It's consistent with what else is in the area. It's consistent with the development that's coming to that area. So that's my 2 cents on why we should. There's a sign there now.
I don't want to belabor the conversation. It's probably something I need to do offline with these guys, but I'm very curious to know if there are other items of question, because I'm trying to get this clear in my head. We make a lot of, I would say, semi-subjective decisions up here every day that are based on context, and so I need to know, I guess, where we stand as a commission on all items in regards to ordinance versus policy. I mean, would the preference be everything be ordinance and this commission not exist? I mean, I might agree with that, but I'm just questioning, I guess, the big picture. And I'm not asking for an answer here, but I'm just saying, like, this whole conversation has left me more confused.
I think we've talked enough. I'll take a motion. Oh, I'm sorry. Yes, I do. Bill Conlon. Is that right, Conlon? Yes. Condon?
Bill Condon. I'm the general manager of Lamar Advertising. 123 Northwest 50th. Yes, I would absolutely agree with almost all of your comments that have been made today regarding to this particular location. Can't speak to the one that Mr. Box raised about that may have been approved prior to and some sort of precedent that may have been set, but I 100% agree with staff recommendations, the way they've kind of highlighted the details and the issues at hand. Frankly, one of the reasons why I'm here, and maybe not even specific for this location, is the amount of spuds that have come across your committee here regarding non-accessory signs through the Spud process. Because in 2018 there was 1, in 2019 there's 6. We're starting out the pace of 2020. We've got 2, and so I think it's frankly a complete circumvention of the actual sign code. And I know I've heard comments regarding the sign code and Plan OKC and the theme of Plan OKC, and this may not necessarily be a forum here, but I would be interested to have further discussions regarding that, because we're one of the largest sign companies here in the city, and we feel that we understand the sign code and how it's interpreted, but it's from as far as the consistency standpoint wise from a business, one of the reasons why I'm here is to try to find out through the Spud process, because maybe I need to reconsider, some of my business strategy of, building new signs through the Spud process. So I'll be happy to answer any questions that you may have, but yeah, we would.
I'm just curious, so are you part of this application or you're not? You're just here to...
No, I'm just here really kind of watch the process, one, and two, that, yeah, I agree with staff's recommendation on the denial because, frankly, that's exactly how we interpret the sign code.
So you support denial is what you're saying?
Yes.
I mean, with all due respect, that's really that kind of hits me wrong. That would be, as a current building owner, I would love a complete moratorium on all construction of new buildings across the entire city,
right,
because my rents are going to go through the roof, and I think that's great. But that's not.
I don't think that's fair.
I don't think that's.
It is.
I don't think that's fair.
I think it's very fair.
Someone who's in the industry who wants to give us his opinion to just dismiss it out of hand and saying, you've got
it's to put in perspective
a dog in the hunt, so we're not listening to you.
It's to put in perspective the nature of those comments. To say that that's not part of the rationale for being opposed to this application is.
I mean, what he's saying is we do have a sign code. This piece of property would require, I-2 zoning, or whatever it would require, C4 or whatever. If you don't use a PUD or SPUD, we don't, under the comprehensive plan and under the zoning ordinance we have, I think, we do not believe that PUDs and SPUDs are an appropriate way to do this. So you've got a sign code, you need zoning, you don't have zoning, you don't get your sign. I mean, that's the deal. So I think that's all he's saying. That's how they've looked at it. That's how they've read it. And what he sees now is that, and this very definitely is a floodgate. I didn't want to get all this started, but I will. For years and years and years and years on this planning commission, people knew what the deal was. They knew what the policy was. They knew exactly what the rules were. For every billboard that went up, 2 had to come down. I mean, we did not promote or allow billboards, and especially not along what we consider to be appearance corridors, highways, where people are looking at Oklahoma City, and we didn't want to see a bunch of visual clutter. And that was the way it was, and everybody understood that. And that grew out of a very bloody fight over the last time that the sign code was amended. And I love to hear you say, we should change it. I hope I'm still around to see that when it happens, because it is a really difficult process. But one of the things that came out of it was the understanding that there weren't going to be new billboards along the highways in Oklahoma City. So everybody did understand what the rules were. Because it was not an ordinance, because it was policy, didn't mean that people didn't know what the deal was. They did. When that changed was when the makeup of this planning commission changed. And so what we're saying now is the reason why people don't know what the deal is because the deal has changed because the personnel have changed. And I think that's not a good thing. The idea that you have to, count noses to see who's sitting on a board or a commission to know whether their policies are going to continue in place or whether, throw the door open. It's all, no holds barred now. And that's exactly what has happened with respect to the introduction of these applications under PUD and SPUD cloaks, to change these sign decisions. And I think it's a bad idea. I think it's a bad precedent. And I think we're going to see dozens of them, if not hundreds of them, because we have opened that door.
I respect and appreciate that history, but I want to know, it's not in dispute that using the PUD and SPUD process is legal within the laws, the framework of the laws and ordinances of Oklahoma City to allow us to build the sign, correct?
We're going to see one in just a minute.
That
we're
is
going to see one later today. And I actually appreciate that more because it made my mind up for me. So we have separation requirements that are defined in the code. We have sizes that are defined in the code. And if this application came here today it would meet those ordinances because they would be redoing it as a part of a bigger application. There's a shopping center today, there's a motel, we have the facts. There's an apartment next door. If that weighs heavily on your opinion of the sign, you can compare that to previous cases and make that up for yourself. But that made my mind up. I'm in support of the application for this reason only. If they came through and they were redeveloping it, they'd come through and use an SPUD or a PUD, which is exactly what our ordinances allow, and I would support the sign because it affronts a highway the same way I've supported all the other signs that affront highways, as long as they meet the separation requirements and they're within the confines of the code, which this one would be. So I'm in support of the application for that reason.
And I think we should include this as part of our conversation about redoing the code and the use of PUDs. I think that there's consensus that we would like to reform that process to make it a more efficient and transparent process, and that needs to be included. But should we hold it against this applicant that we haven't made all those decisions yet, that the code revision's not done? I don't think it's fair to do that.
What I would just say to remember is that each case is individually. You have to look at the surroundings and the context and see what's around it and make your decision based upon that, whether or not the size of the sign is appropriate at this location.
If this wasn't next to a Turnpike, I wouldn't support it at all.
And I think that is an absolutely fair way to look at this. If it were coming in today, if it were coming in for redevelopment, what would your decision be? So.
As the person personally responsible for probably putting up 70% of the litter on a stick you guys are talking about over the last 40 years, I can tell you now that every billboard company in town would circumvent to get another billboard location if they thought about it, had that opportunity, and could legally do it. The application we're talking about on 63rd Street was my company's. That's why I recused myself from the application. I know Lamar in the past has had the opportunity to build signs, replace structures with bigger structures because of an ODOT deal where they had to take stuff down and they could move it and it didn't quite fit code and it got to be put in there. So every billboard company in the United States is always looking for the next best place to put something. And unless, like what we talked about, unless we change this as a city and the PUD applications no longer can apply to billboards, then you're correct. This is going to keep going on. And so either get on the bandwagon or don't. And you guys have a ton of locations and lots of contacts. And, I mean, I agree, disagree. It kind of is what it is. Signs are there, and unless we completely outlaw them, the people who own them are going to try to make them bigger, more valuable, to sell for a higher rate. And I mean, like Mike said, if this wasn't on a turnpike, I probably wouldn't support this application either, but it's just a billboard. It's just another billboard on a highway. So.
Anybody else have thoughts on this?
You look like you want to say something.
It's mostly been said already. The subjectivity issue is one I have to Ace's point, and I appreciate the counselors, and that is that in the future, I too will consider subjectivity. If we were only objective, computers could do our job. We're here to consider each situation. So if this were not where it is and what's around it, I'm thinking of that. I think that's fine. That's why we're here. So it's on a turnpike, though, so that mostly sways me. So don't be surprised if I and a lot of us aren't. There's some level of subjectivity that is inappropriate. There's some that is appropriate, and that's our job to determine how far do we go. So it was a little too much discussion of, by gosh, objective what. That's a little too far. So, anyway, thanks.
Thank you. Anyone else?
I think I'm in support of the application. My concern is the multifamily nearby, and so I had a discussion with David regarding the louvers. We didn't get into nits. We saw one application previously that they were going to reduce the nits.
So the code requires reduction in nits after a certain time frame. Are you talking about something further than that? I mean, so I think it's dusk. It requires a reduction to a certain level to account for surrounding residential. I see Matt nodding his head. He's more knowledgeable on. Okay. So I do believe that with the louvers, it'll be a total blackout from the multifamily. So we can add that as a TE to any motion. No, but we can add a TE to any motion.
Just adding a TE for the louvers.
For the louvers.
We don't need to add one, though, for the nits, because that's dealt with in the, and we're not amending that within the, yeah.
Right.
Okay.
David?
Yes, sir.
Weren't you going to say something about the highways?
Well, and, someday we won't have highways when Mr. Highsmith gets his way, and so all of these arguments will be gone.
Okay.
But until we do,
Okay.
I was going to save that for the next case.
Anyone else? Since we've spent this much time, we might as well spend a little more. Anybody else have anything you want to say? No? Then I have a motion, don't I?
I'll make a motion to recommend approval on SPUD 1184, adding a technical evaluation to require light shielding louvers be installed.
Second.
I have a motion and a second to approve item number 14 with the amendment to the TE as indicated. Cast your votes, please. And it is approved.
Thank you.
Item 15 is an application to rezone 9507 West Memorial Road from AA to PUD 1742.
Good afternoon. Kendall Dillon with Crafton Toll, representing the applicant. This is an application for a PUD on an 80-acre tract that's located on the north side of Memorial Road. It's about a half mile back to the east of Morgan Road. The site is currently zoned agricultural, and if you've noticed, I don't know if staff can put up the master development plan. If not, I've got one. But you can see in the proposal of our PUD that we're proposing two tracts. The large tract is about 76 acres, and it will be proposed as a single-family component of the development. The tract will adhere entirely to the R1 zoning regulations, and also in accordance with that, and additionally, we've added the architectural standard of 70% brick, rock, stone, masonry, and those sort of things. You'll notice as illustrated on the master development plan, I think there's about 175 lots shown there, which yields a density of about 2.3 dwelling units per acre, so it's pretty low density. You'll notice that our design concept has a street that does loop all the way around the property, connects back out to Memorial Road twice so that we can meet all the access requirements as we plat it and develop it. You'll notice also that there's a street stub on both the east and the west. Both those line up with the approved preliminary plats for the developments that abut us on those two sides. We do not show on this master development plan a street stub to the north. However, it is listed under the technical evaluation, so we will be agreeing to that here in just a little bit. So that's tract 1, which will be the single family. On the south end of it, you'll notice tract 2, which is a lot smaller. It's about 4 acres, and it will be a residential or a residential style office development under the O2 base zoning. We have included the same architectural standard on it as the residential. We've limited the height to 2 stories, 35 feet. We've limited the maximum building size down to 6,000 square feet, and then obviously we've limited the signage to 8-foot monument signs. So that's kind of the highlights of the PUD. As far as the surrounding zoning, again, we are adjoined on the west by a single-family PUD, which has a companion preliminary plat that's been approved by the name of Country Grove, I believe is the name of it. On the north, we're adjoined by just vacant agricultural land, and then on the east side is the Savannah Estates Edition, which obviously is an ongoing development as well. As far as the site is currently located in the urban reserved area on the comp plan. There's an existing water line that is already there along Memorial Road, so we will be connecting to it, looping it through the addition to provide all of the fire, water service as well as fire protection internal. There's a existing sanitary sewer line that's about a half mile north of this, so that we will be extending that down to the site as well. So we're providing obviously full utilities to the site. I'm sure as you've noticed in your staff report, I think staff has recommended denial of this application, and I think it's based upon the measure of they don't feel that this application would meet the measure of making it the urban low based upon, I think, the fire response time. I think if you look at our map that I brought with me today, you'll notice you'll notice the bold red line represents the fire response time that's of concern. And so if you notice all of the white labels, those are existing and ongoing developments that would be outside of that response time. So if you look just on this particular part of Oklahoma City, in this area, there are about 28 developments that are either existing or ongoing at this time. A lot of them are new, and in fact, I'm involved in about 12 of them myself. So most of them are fairly new, but there's about 28 developments in that area. And again, let me draw attention to the fact that there's an existing approved zoning and preliminary plat that abuts us both on the east and the west. In addition to that, if you notice kind of up on the far right and to the left, you'll see a little blue hatched area. That is actually an area that was removed a few years ago from the current comp plan from urban reserve to urban low. So I think if you look at that, and if you'll also let me point out the areas that are hatched in yellow, and those are areas that are currently zoned agricultural today, but yet show up on the current comprehensive plan as urban low. And so I think if you look at our application, if we were just a half mile to the east, we would be in conformance with the urban low plan designation, or even if we were a half mile east and 2 miles to the north, we would still be in conformance with that urban low. So it would meet the measure for the UL designation if we were in these other areas. So when you look at it from our perspective, it seems hard for us to understand why the measure for our development is different than all of the other surrounding properties that are being developed and that abut us. And so with that, we feel like it's a good application. It's consistent, compatible with everything that's out there, and just continues to follow the development trend. There are 3 TEs. We're in agreement with TE number 1. TE number 2, I'm not exactly sure how to interpret that, but obviously, as per our master development plan, we have a continuous common area from the office track on the south all the way to the north. We will provide pedestrian connection to that common area. So as long as that meets the intent, we're all right with TE number 3. And then as far as TE number 2, I'm sorry, and then TE number 3, we cannot agree to provide suppression systems. We can't compete if we develop today when we have development all around us and we sell the same house and it's $5,000 or $6,000 more. We can't compete in that market, so we can't agree to TE number 3. So again, I think if you look at the context of what's going on in this area, if you look at the measure that evidently historically has been used in regards to the comp plan of how these different vacant tracts, even though they're agricultural and haven't been developed, still appear as urban low, we don't see any reason that our tract should be kept in urban reserve with us extending utilities, and so we'd ask for your approval.
Do I understand that there is a pending comp plan amendment?
There is, and there was a noticing error, so it will be heard next meeting.
Why don't we just continue this so that they're heard together?
Well, predominantly for 2 reasons. One, we've got some contractual issues, so we're bumping up against deadlines. But number 2, I don't know, staff will recommend denial of it as well. So it seems like we can have the merits heard today and move forward.
So as I understand it, the issue is the fire response, that it is beyond urban or beyond rural response times even at this location.
As per the comprehensive plan, the map in the comprehensive plan, yes.
So the options are to continue this case and wait on the comprehensive plan amendment and that determination, to agree to sprinkle them, which would remove staff's objection, or to push this forward for either approval or denial today.
Correct. And my logic is, and you all can help me if I'm wrong, but based upon the recommendation on this application, I would assume that staff will recommend denial on the comp plan. So I don't see myself what changes between now and next week if we delay it and wait on the comp plan.
I'm in agreement with that.
Well,
I think that's fair.
I think the comp plan review by staff, though, might provide further color for us, correct?
But we know what it's going to say, right? I agree with you. It's going to say that they meet the water and the sewer, because you said that you do.
Exactly.
But they don't meet fire.
But the difference,
so that's the report.
Well, I guess the difference, this will be my question to staff, is can you guys talk about the comp plan here if it was noticed for next agenda meeting.
We can talk.
Voting on it today, so.
Yeah, we can talk about the comp plan all we want.
Okay.
The CPA was, it was noticed for next time, but, yeah.
And when we say noticed for next time, what's, I guess, how did we not notice the comp plan, and then I was under the distinct impression that we didn't notice for comp plan amendments?
We don't do the 300-foot radius like we do for zoning, but it's still published that we're going to.
So it's a published notice is the issue. So we had a published notice that didn't go out in time.
Yeah, it was a day late getting to the city clerk. There was a miscommunication.
Well, can we hear from staff on then, the content of what would be said in a denial of the comp plan amendment?
So, appreciate
How
this.
about in a consideration of, as opposed to?
Whatever the language needs to be.
Well, yeah, just to clarify and appreciate the map here, so this is a funny little peninsula of urban reserve that comes down, and when we did Plan OKC, there was no water or sewer really close by. It didn't meet the thresholds that we had established. And in addition, as you see in the red line, it's beyond even the rural fire service. And we have that problem, as you can see, to the east and also quite a bit to the west. So that blue line right there is where the urban reserve, you can see the green area, where urban reserve picks up. So the reason we drew that line at the time is because we had a lot of plats that were already in place. And so we didn't want to continue to build where there was not good fire service. I don't think we had done that analysis when the previous plan was done. We didn't have the tools to do it. Now we do. We can analyze the network. We can see how quickly fire service can get to any given location. So we did that with Plan OKC and came up with this result. So that was kind of a compromise of where do we draw this line. So it can seem a little confusing, but that is the reason why the line was drawn where it was. So we're left with this situation where there is that peninsula that is in an area that does not have fire service, and their goal is to get 70% of the time. I forget what the exact response rate is, or the number of seconds, 390 something, I think. That's their goal, to get there within that time, and this is beyond that, and so Plan OKC discourages development until that can happen. Now, I will say that there was a lot of talk about putting a fire station here during the bond planning previous to 2017, and we've talked to the fire chief about this issue, about sprinkling, about a fire station up here. That was on the list. It didn't quite get prioritized high enough because we had other needs elsewhere in the city. It's likely that it will be funded with the next bond, but we can't say for sure that. But it could be built 20 years from now because of the way bonds work. We don't know.
Well, can I ask in this regard, like, this is where I'm kind of dumb. I've never actually been a homeowner, so say they build this and I go buy a home out on this development. What are, as a Oklahoma City tax-paying citizen living here, what are my expectations? Like, what am I allowed to expect from fire response? Do I move in here and expect, just like any other resident of Oklahoma City, if I call the fire department, they're going to get there within a certain amount of time? And what I'm hearing is that they're not, whatever cutoff that the fire department says we can get there and safely save your home or save your life or whatever, we're saying this isn't safe. And so an approval here today would mean what?
Well, we're saying, so Plan OKC outlines by whatever LUDA you're in, kind of an expected level of service. So, if you live in an urban area, you should reasonably expect to have, obviously, water and sewer, but a certain level of service when it comes to fire. And, what we're saying is this doesn't meet it right now. It'd be, what the plan says is it doesn't meet it right now. It'd be best to wait until we can get fire service there, or you could sprinkle it. Because then you have immediate fire service.
I guess my question, maybe this is for you. Do home buyers in this area understand? Are they going to buy this home knowing that they're beyond what the city believes is safe for fire response?
Most likely not.
right?
I mean, I can't, don't know if I could answer that question. I think what they would look at and say, okay, if I move in this addition, would I be any different than all of the other neighborhoods that surround me?
People
I would
don't
assume.
care about that if their house is on fire. I think the thing of it is, if it's an urban development, an urban density, an urban level of development, people expect that they're going to be getting urban services. That's the thing.
Well,
And there is fire protection. I mean, we are extending the water into the addition. There's fire hydrants. It's just simply the response time as to how long I assume that it takes the fire trucks or the emergency to respond. And so my point and our argument is we're having a little difficulty trying to figure out why our site is different
this goes back
than
to
the rest of everything that's in this area. And even if we use the fire response time as the measurement tool, then that to me still, I have trouble understanding why all those areas in yellow were designated in the new comp plan as urban low if they don't meet that criteria. So when you look at it in terms of that, and you look at it in terms of we're adjoined on the west by an approved preliminary plat on the west, and we have 28 other additions in there, then what is it that arbitrarily makes our case at this point in time not meet the criteria, just like the property up on County Line a few years ago that was removed from this current comp plan from urban reserve to urban low to conform. That's where we're having trouble and do not understand the issue or the problem with our current application. To us, it looks to me that we meet the same criteria for urban low as everybody else beyond that red line that we've just discussed.
I hear you. I mean, I'm in agreement with you. The answer is yes, we want them to come put our fires out. I mean, I can see my house from his map. And yes, please come put my fire out. But as I look at this, the issue is that west of, just so you understand kind of the context of this too, suburban issue, to the west of County Line is Piedmont Schools, okay? And that area where he's building and all the areas, the reason that development pressure is existing here is because Piedmont is probably one of the most desirable school districts at this point you can live in. And that's where the development pressure is coming. And this looks like cases where, you know, for example, neighbors came in and complained about the streets not being wide enough, for the construction of new schools and other things like that. I mean, not all of our infrastructure is going to be able to keep up exactly how we want it to. Or in a perfect world plan scenario, we would have all these services available and then development would just magically appear. It never works like that because that's just kind of the way of the world. I think if I look at this and we're having a comp plan discussion, when I see something like, okay, the roads are really bad. There was somebody who came in with a development at 150th and I believe it was Morgan, which was the Habitat for Humanity. Was that Morgan?
I think it was.
Morgan. And the issue was 150th it's not a street. There's no street there. You literally cannot drive it on a rainy day. So that was a deal for me. That's a deal breaker issue because you're putting all that density in place. Here, you got water, you got sewer, you got roads, you have everything. You got a turnpike, you've got great schools. So you're going to see this development pressure come. And so I sort of get stuck on a chicken or an egg. To Jeff's point, maybe I should recuse myself because as a Ward 8 resident, I know that if I can put more houses over here, that fire station gets a lot more likely. It gets put to a top of the list when you start talking about bond issues. If I don't know where it goes. So maybe I do have a conflict now. Because I would love to have a fire station closer to my house, and the only way to do that is to keep allowing that density and that demand to drag the resources to it. We are going to see, this is not the last one that we're going to see, and there are areas out here, candidly, where, again, and I think my comments about objectivity and subjectivity I didn't do a good job of articulating that, but if you come in and you say, look, the roads are bad, there's no sewer, there's no water, but we'd love to build it, it's like, look, I get it's Piedmont Schools, but it's a step too far.
You're making you're saying roads, sewer, water. Honestly, those things, I'd be like, look, if somebody wants to live out there on a bad road, what do I care? What do I care if...
Just from a density standpoint, I just mean the infrastructure wouldn't support that. From a planning commissioner standpoint, I'm just referring to...
Actually, I mean, your point is well taken in one regard. At least you can go out there and see that the road is bad when you're making a choice to buy. I'm not sure you can go out there and see that there's not good fire service.
That's why I'm making a distinction. To me, this is a life safety issue. And if home buyers are coming in expecting a certain level of service and not knowing any better necessarily on like what they're actually purchasing in that regard, you know, that's where I'm getting a little hung up here. I don't care if you're like moving in, you're like, look, yeah, I'm on septic and I'm on well water, whatever. Hey, that's your choice.
Yeah,
I don't care about that.
But said no homeowner ever, how close am I to fire response times? Like in the home buying process. I mean, raise your hand if you said that when you were going to.
I think if you're buying a home within the city limits, you expect that it's met certain criteria for service and safety.
Well, but one of the reasons people move out here, Ace, is they want to fancy themselves that they don't live in the city limits. They want to fancy themselves that they're still sending their kids to semi-rural schools, and
that's fine for me.
And you've got an elementary school literally walking distance, as it relates to suburban walking distances, to this neighborhood, which is, I mean, and you've got a quarter section that is completely platted and ready to be developed to the west, a quarter section, or at least half a quarter section to the east, a quarter section to the north. I mean, this whole area is being developed, is my point. I don't think that you can come in at this stage of the game and go, well, in this particular area, we're going to sprinkle it. Because I'll tell you right now, that's an economic non-starter for the deal, and I don't think that's the right way to handle it. I don't.
Well, then, for me, at least for today, I would have to at least hear another option.
Fire.
If you're like, okay, we can't do sprinkling, and we're not going to get our fire response time, then give me something, because I don't know right now that I can support it on the life safety issue.
I get it. Fire's comments were access entry to comply, second entrance, or fire suppression required for Tract 1. Well, I mean, they have two entrances. They're stubbing to the east and the west. They're agreeing to stub to the north. I mean, they're creating as many paths to entry in this thing as they can. I don't know what more that comment from Fire could have meant.
Fair enough. I didn't even. I'm going to go look at that.
Access entry to comply, second entrance, or fire suppression required for Tract 1.
Right. And that's the way we originally interpreted the staff report, because the comments from Fire did say or, which we're meeting all the access requirements, and again, we're providing the fire hydrants and bringing water into it. And I don't know exactly the accuracy of the line, but it is interesting to me that literally if you're on the other side of Memorial Road, then you're fine. So again, our issue...
Every area of designation has an edge. I mean, that's, it is what it is.
I agree with that.
And I don't disagree in that manner, but I am, obviously, it is interesting if you think about the response time, that if you were on the other side of Memorial, then you would be fine, and we'd be sitting here not having this argument, and we'd be with Urban Low, and here we go.
Mr. Mike Wilson walked in. I don't know if he wants to speak to this or not.
Mike Wilson with the Oklahoma City Fire Marshal's Office. You started talking about me, so I guess I had to come in. But the original review, these are done a long time in advance of when it actually gets heard. And that original review was done. Since then, the fire chief and the fire marshal have met with planning and discussed this problem that they're having, which is that these response times in these areas that are growing, such as this, are becoming a problem for the fire department, that they can't get to them. If that nearest station is off doing something else, then they have to come from a long way away to get to that point, and that makes the response times really out of whack. And they have said that on their end of things, if you're doing a development, residential development, and it's longer than the rural response time, then the fire marshal and the fire chief's position is going to be that the homes need to be sprinkled. And that may, like you say, it'll change if things get built so that there is a fire station up there. But it's right now with the manpower and the stations the way they are, that they just can't get there in a reasonable amount of time. And residential sprinklers are one of the best things to prevent life safety. They may not save the building, but that's really not what we're that concerned with. It's just to get the people out of the building. So that's been their position, and it is relatively new that decision has been made based on I guess, current development patterns that you've had up there in these rural areas that we don't have very quick response time to.
One thing, Mike, I want to make sure that, I respect that, and we had a case in here not very long ago that was actually in ACE's ward where fire came in and said, look, we're not sure we can get to these back buildings. If there's a fire, we're not sure we can get there. And it's like, at that point, I'm like, okay, well, this conversation's over, But if that's going to be the policy, there are huge sections of the city in Ward 4, 7, 3, 8 that are going to be precluded for development. We're going to basically shut development down under that policy. So
the fire department really doesn't believe that. If it becomes a requirement that you sprinkle, then everyone's going to have to sprinkle. Many other states, the whole state is being sprinkled as they build. Oklahoma's not there yet, but many others are, and it's a very good way to conserve water because the residential sprinklers use so much less water than when a fireman comes in with a 250-gallon per minute hose and blows everything off the walls, because that's the kind of pressure that they have, whereas a residential sprinkler will put it out with 25 gallons per minute out of a sprinkler head. So there are many reasons to sprinkle besides just the life safety aspects. There are, based on different companies, but there are insurance savings that the homeowners can get being sprinkled. And if insurance companies know about the response time issues, they will have higher premiums. Even though they have hydrants in their subdivision, if the response time is that high, the insurance company will likely increase their insurance, just like they do for the hail damage, wind damage on roofs, but they increase the premium in certain areas. People live on the south side, they consider them living in more, and so they have a higher instance of hail damage.
I might mention that when talking to the chief when we had this meeting, just to make sure we're on the same page, he mentioned that one of his deputy chiefs has done quite a bit of research into sprinkling and the cost, and they're actually pretty reasonable. I think it was around $1 a square foot. But
it's
don't
higher
quote me
than
on
that.
A buck a foot?
Yeah, it's higher than that.
How much higher than that?
We've gotten estimates before, and it's been as low as $1.35 based on a contractor getting the ability to do a whole bunch of houses, and so he can do the same thing in all the houses, where just like your framing crew that you get they build the same house 10 times, it's cheaper because they know what they're building. And the same way with sprinklers, but, honestly, the records we've gotten have been $2 down to $1.35 for new construction. Existing construction can be hired based on what all they have to get torn up to put a sprinkler system in.
Has our city council ever, do we know, they ever reviewed or considered an ordinance to require suppression in structures, residential structures?
I don't know that we've done single family. It's been in the building code, and the state has taken it out of the building code for the last 2 or 3 editions. And Oklahoma City has done the same thing and taken it out of the building code. And the fire marshal's intent is to try to leave that in the code this time, that when we move to the next residential code, we're in the 2015 right now. Hopefully we'll be in the 2018 at some point in the future. But that there's been a lot of backlash from homeowners associations and some others about the cost of those systems and whether they're worth how much you have to put in. And the fire marshal's office has always said, well, that's really no different than a kitchen upgrade for granite countertops or something. And this is a life safety system that's going to put a fire out, hopefully before we even get there. Now, fire does make a lot of medical calls, and it's always an issue because, when we get a 911 call, we still go there, whether it's a fire or not. And that response time, again, has a big effect on what happens before we get there.
Do sprinkler systems require maintenance? And
yes. And,
so,
yeah.
Some, not a lot. They're sealed systems. They only, if something, just like any other water line or gas line you'd have in your house, If it's leaking, then you might have an issue. But as a rule, you know, it's people have often asked us about the concern of in the seismic zone and everything else, and I said, well, you should probably be more concerned about your plumbing lines and gas lines than a sprinkler line. Because
residential would be different. In the commercial context, too, you're required to keep them tagged and inspected. And to your point about insurance companies, they come out and look. And I'll just tell you right now, every time that shows up on an insurance inspection, if you're a building owner, I mean, you got to go home and at least have a couple before you make that phone call. Because there's not but a handful of companies that do that work. And so every time you call them out, it's like dealing with an elevator company, and I know that may be lost on people who are not used to it, but if you're laughing, you've done it. It is absolutely, it's very expensive to maintain those systems, especially if there has to be work done, especially these older systems that are wet systems. I mean, it's a very costly process to have to do that, and if you pull a permit or something, you have to update that or bring it up to code or compliance. It's very expensive. I find it very hard to believe that the IBC is ever going to get to the point where for a standard residential structure, you're going to see a requirement for residential suppression.
That's been in the IRC for probably 10 years at least. But the state of Oklahoma has not approved it.
Any place that's subject to grass fires, as we are, would be that place.
It's common.
But on a 13D system, a typical residential type system, there is no annual inspection like there is on a commercial system where you get the system tagged, where it gets green tagged every year.
Right.
And then when we go inspect it and it hadn't been tagged in 5 or 6 years and we have to get, you know, them to go get update. Residential does not require that. The homeowner is expected to take care of it and basically more or less with their insurance company, because if they don't take care of it, then the insurance company is going to try to get out of settling anything if you haven't maintained your sprinkler system. But there's no requirement to have any particular person go out there and physically inspect the system every year like commercial does.
Well, you said there are states that have universally adopted this?
Yes.
What's an example of that?
I think California, Arizona, they're pretty much the western states where they have a lack of water because they have problems with water lines and extending and getting the pressures that you need for fire trucks to actually, you know, operate properly. So I think they have pushed that because it's so hard to get to some of those areas and because of the water shortage issues, they have required sprinklers. And so they have a history of people constructing residences with sprinkler systems, whereas we only have a few subdivisions typically in Oklahoma City that we have required over time to be sprinkled. So we don't have near as much history yet on those residential sprinklers to determine. We haven't specifically heard of that many complaints of sprinkler systems failing, or usually they fail when they get turned off. And that's normal because the homeowner can go in there and technically turn the system off and then you don't have sprinkler. But they're doing that to themselves when they do that.
Mike, you may correct me, but I do think, I mean, the building community has worked with the city every time the building codes are updated, and so those exclusions to the sprinkler system are a joint effort among the parties to adopt the code as it is today. So that
I guess it's joint. We don't.
But the powers that be that adopt the building code, that has been
the IRC. We've
vetted with the home building community as well as the people that adopt the code, and that has continually been eliminated or not included into the building code. And I do know, you know, and I don't know.
Again, as a rule, it's home builders. They're the only ones interested in the adoption of the construction standards. And so our committees are pretty well represented from home builders and people who maybe real estate sell houses. And so they have been the ones that, as an organization, have been opposed to the state or the city adopting a blanket, all houses have to be sprinkled position. But we're getting to a point, and the fire chief has said, when we do the next one, we're going to push more firmly for full sprinkler systems everywhere. It may not go, but it's one of those things.
Regardless for today, right? We're here today, and I think for me it was the question of the note in our Spud that says, city departments fire access entry to comply, second entrance or fire suppression required for Tract 1. What you're saying is that or.
That was my comment, which was before the fire chief and the fire marshal met with planning and discussed these problems of areas that are in excess of the rule response time.
For me,
sorry.
I guess
that's a little bit of, and I'm trying to be respectful in my comments, but you do see a little bit from where my perspective of every other development and all that's going on, but then a recent meeting, and now I'm required to either we're going to deny it or I've got to provide sprinklers. And really, if you read the staff report, it's deny it, or if you decide to choose it or decide to approve it, then provide sprinkler systems. So really, there's still the overarching recommendation of denial based upon the fact that it doesn't meet the urban low criteria. But you look at your own comp plan, and I'm still struggling to understand why that there's property in the current comp plan that's designated as urban low, but yet wouldn't meet the criteria that I'm being held to. That's my comment. I mean, we're providing utilities the same as everybody. The only difference is the fire response, they have the same or worse than we have. They're in compliance. I can't get a staff recommended for approval to take it from urban reserve to urban low. That's where I'm having trouble understanding the measure that's being used on us as compared to everyone else that's outside that response time.
These weren't Spuds or PUDs? These were.
No, go ahead.
It's ag. It's agricultural zoning today. So, and I've created the map just to illustrate that I could have understood it a little better when the new comp plan was when it was created. If those tracts would have been already zoned R1, then okay. That's the justification.
I think we understand your point.
So to answer your question, and going back to my previous comments, the reason why much, if not all of that, was included in urban low is because it was already in some stage of entitlement, preliminary plats or already zoned or something like that. So, for example, the piece up there that you mentioned, the blue line, that was recently added because it was part of a subdivision I think we'd already platted or zoned.
Right, I did that one.
And so that's kind of, and granted, it is a funny area. There are other, the southwest area of the city, these areas where you're going from urban to rural or from urban to future urban. It's awkward because the way that the sewer sheds are means that you have really funny peninsulas and all kinds of and street networks, so it's often not very clean cut. But there was a method of the madness, and mostly it was that there were already a lot of plats out there, so we couldn't go back and remove those entitlements because they didn't have good fire service.
And that's the reason that I highlighted everything today that's agricultural, just to illustrate the fact that there was no entitlements when the plan was adopted. That's where we're having an issue. There's this line that's urban reserve over, and if you look immediately to the east of it, you'll see that, especially at that time, because I rezoned the property to the north a few years ago when we did the comp plan amendment, it was ag as well. So that, what was the criteria for establishing that line? My contention was it was based on utilities and that the fire response time was not part of the criteria, but it is today. I understand things change, but you do understand at least our argument on we've got a landowner that's trying to sell some property. We got my client obviously looking to do a development and stay in the area that he's already in. We make an application looking at the surrounding area, everything that's done, that there's an approved preliminary plat and zoning on our west and on our east, but yet we get a recommendation for denial. That's the reason it's kind of a difficult pill for us. But we still feel like that it's conforming and compatible. If the same measure was used for us as everyone else, then we feel like that it should be approved.
And so full circle here, every piece of dirt is different. I think what I understood from Mike Wilson's comments was that the increase in demand is decreasing the response time, and that makes sense to me logically. So I think we understand where we are. The question is whether it's a health and safety issue, whether, this piece of property needs to be sprinkled or not sprinkled, what side of that issue you're on. I think we've talked about this enough.
If you're looking at me, I'll make a motion, but my motion is going to be to recommend approval to City Council. So we'll just see where we are. I'll make that motion. His argument is persuasive to me, candidly, and I think that City Council have a chance to weigh in on this, and I hope that they weigh in on the issue of whether or not residential sprinklers should be required. But we got a case coming up with a comp plan amendment where part of it's in beyond rural response time, so we're going to get to have this discussion again. So,
So are you, in this motion, are you going to include TE3 or not?
No, I'm going to strike it because the initial comment from Fire before a subsequent meeting was a second entrance. They have 4.
Then I would like to, can we separate the two? Can we divide the question? Can we vote on that issue first of whether or not to include, or you're saying no?
Well,
gotcha.
Yeah.
Okay. So I think, correct me if I'm wrong, I was just shaking my head, but
well, let me just take a swing at it, and then we'll see where we wind up. So, by the way, real quick, because this got lost in the shuffle, there was some discussion about whether TE2, you were understanding what staff was articulating there. Do you want some clarity on that issue?
We will agree with TE2, given that master development plan that we showed that has the common area, that we will provide pedestrian access to those common areas from the tracks and from each side of the common area. If that is the intent.
Agreeable to staff, the interpretation?
Basically, it's this. If the comment or the intent is that we build a walking trail or some path all the way around that huge common area, then we can't agree to that.
Yeah.
I think we can, the way I interpret T2, we can agree to it, but let it be of record that we do not intend to build a walking trail all the way around the whole common area.
Yeah, I don't know that was the intent. If it was,
okay.
We should.
I'm just making sure.
Assuming we have agreement there, I'll make a motion to recommend approval to City Council on PUD 1742, subject to the elimination of TE3.
Second. I have a motion and a second to approve item number 15, the elimination of TE3. Is that right? TE3. Cast your votes.
Thank you all.
It's approved.
Do you promise you're not going to come back with a Spud to put a billboard there?
I was thinking about it, but after today, no.
Okay, I think we're going to Okay, let's start up again, shall we? Where are we? Item 17.
Item 16 has been continued, February 27. Item 17 is consideration of a proposed map amendment to the comprehensive plan, changing the land use topology area designation from rural medium to urban low intensity. And it's located south of Southeast 29th Street and east and west of South Post Road.
Greetings, Commission. Susan Atkinson, Senior Planner with the Planning Department. We're here to talk about Comp Plan Amendment 2019-00005, as Jeff just described. Next slide, please. This is a request in the southeast quadrant of the city, and it is a proposal to change the LUDA from the existing rural medium to urban low. And this is associated with an application for PUD 1750. Again, this is the general vicinity of the subject site in the southeast quadrant of the city. The subject site is made up of a number of tracts, and at such time that you take up the question of the PUD, you'll understand the configuration of them. There are 5 tracts, and that's why the boundary looks the way that it does. They are south of Southeast 29th Street and on either side of South Post Road. And as you can see from the map, the prevailing land use intensity here is rural medium. This is just a slide describing rural medium. You've seen this before, but in general, rural medium areas are located, they can allow some additional density. They are sometimes located adjacent to urban low. They tend to have no services, and residential development there tends to be on septic systems and has rural response, fire response time or less. And so that's just generally these are the service characteristics of rural medium. And again, the request is to amend the comp plan to make this urban low. Urban low, again, you're very familiar with this, tends to assume that you have the full stack of urban services: water, fire, and sewer. In this particular case, the area will be served. It isn't yet, but it will be. Sewer service will be provided, and it will continue to have a rural service level for emergency response. This is in part because this is an area where the street network is not complete, which is not unusual in rural areas, although it is fairly close to I-40, and there's lots of major arterial road network around here, but there are parts of the surrounding area where there's not a complete street network. This is what the zoning profile is currently. Definitely in this area, many of these parcels are already zoned R1. And the land, as far as the existing land use, much of the land involved in the subject application is undeveloped. There's a little bit of low-density residential development in the area, but most of it is undeveloped. The middle tract, which is you can see there is a sort of a square quarter section, or quarter, it is heavily treed. So in terms of our recommendations, the 80.44 acre subject tract will soon be ready to receive urban services. But we would also like to present for your consideration that a larger surrounding area may also be ready to receive urban services. And in part this is happening because just to the west of the subject site, the city of Midwest City is developing a multi-purpose athletic facility. So again, I neglected to say, but you can see on the map, Southeast 29th Street is a municipal boundary, so Midwest City is north of 29th Street. Midwest City is developing this park. It is on Oklahoma City land, and as a result, they are required, and there has been a fair amount of administrative discussion about this subject, they will be required to extend water and sewer services to fully serve their park. In doing so, that will make it possible and in fact required for adjacent parcels to the east to connect to these urban services. So what will happen is, that's why we say they will be ready to receive services. Midwest City already has funding in hand. They passed a general obligation bond to fund the development of their park. They have done their preliminary development work and are waiting for council approval on their design contract. So this is in motion already. And this is setting up a chain of events that, again, we believe makes a larger area soon ready to receive urban services. We had a fairly lengthy conversation with the Utilities Department to understand the servability, particularly with respect to sewer, of the area, and their call is that we could, the conditions are favorable to sewer the area east to Noma Road, which is further east than the subject application. So again, that gets us back to our recommendation that a larger area, this is in close proximity to Tinker, to Tinker activities, to Tinker jobs. Again, the subject parcel made up of 5 different tracts has a lot of different proposed land uses that may be appropriate, and you'll know more about that when you consider the matter of the PUD. But what you have before you is 2 options. You can approve the application as presented, which is for the 80.44 acres, or you can approve amending the comprehensive plan for the larger area, which includes about 395 acres total, inclusive of the subject application. And with that, I'll pause. If you have any questions for me, I'll try to answer.
I, of all people, didn't get a staff report on this. Staff agrees with this and is in support of the...
Yes,
right.
Yes. Our recommendation is that you consider approving the application. And with...
The biggest one, the biggest area?
Right, because we believe the larger, almost 400-acre area is ready to receive services. The Commission, however, does have the option to consider the smaller area should you feel that is the right course of action.
And so the larger area was noticed. We're good to act on that today if we so choose.
Again, as a comp plan amendment, we notice in the journal record that is our statutory requirement, but yes, that did happen.
Okay. Okay.
Any other questions for staff?
Sorry. Were you here for the previous discussion?
I was.
Is there any reason to rehash that in this item? I mean, it looks like we've got rural fire service.
We do have rural fire service over much of the area, and that's going to be true. This is not an area that will likely ever have another fire station.
At rural fire service, is that, we're happy with that for R1?
You got Midwest City Fire there too. So,
yeah.
you know.
At the moment, there is not a, I'm missing the term, reciprocal automatic aid agreement. Thank you, Jeff. There's not an automatic aid agreement in place now with Midwest City, but it is something that the 2 cities are in negotiation to discuss. That would be helpful in this particular area.
I'm not sure, unless you may know more than me, but I don't know that we're in negotiation right now.
I don't know about negotiation, but I think it has been discussed and will continue to be discussed.
Yeah, so we currently have automatic aid agreements with Yukon and Mustang, and the fire chief would like to continue to do that. Oh, sorry. I turned my button on, but if this isn't here, it really doesn't work that well.
They taught us about that at our...
Yeah. Good point. Thank you. I stand corrected and humbled.
It's been a long meeting.
Let me restart then. So we have automatic aid agreements with Yukon and Mustang, and the fire chief would like to continue to do those with other cities, and so that's kind of a long-term goal. But in this case, yeah, it's rural fire service. The comp plan says it's rural fire service, just barely. So, and it's right on the edge of the city, so there's probably not going to be an opportunity to put an additional fire station in there. So, it's not ideal, and we often have these problems on the edge of the cities or where we meet another city, whether it be, sewer or something like that, where we got a funny little area that maybe is in the wrong sewer shed. We've got to pump it up, and in this case, we don't have additional area that we can put a fire station there and serve. So, and because Post Road doesn't access the freeway, there's no opportunity for the fire service to get easily there. So the last one, sorry, just to clarify, the last one was beyond rural. This one is classified as rural. So it's a little better, still not ideal for urban, but.
Is this an example, though, where the city is going to push for fire suppression in the R2 portion, given all those things you just laid out?
My understanding is, well, I'll let Mike speak to that. I think we were just going to go for beyond rural, where in the red zone, basically, that's where we would require sprinkling. But
correct. The issue is when an area is beyond rural response times that we have the bigger concern needing the suppression. On the rezoning, it's not necessarily fire's position to object to you rezoning a property. It gets more into when they develop. When they come in with a plat, and those are residential lots, and they are longer than rural response time, really that's when we're going to be saying those should be sprinkled.
Well,
that's not our opportunity, though.
Yeah, well, and that's a really dangerous, so as you guys continue to talk about this policy, that's really dangerous, because once we agree to rezone it, oftentimes the minute the plat comes in, well, the comment is, well, we've already agreed to zone it this way, we got to, Well,
that's why we bring it up. I mean, so that they're at least notified, or someone's notified that that's where our position is, and but until they come in and actually build something, if say you have rezone it to residential, and they build a large church or elementary school on it, that's allowed in residential. That's not going to be a problem unless they get over code requirements where they have to sprinkle.
Right.
But our issue is these single-family dwellings or multifamily dwellings where we have the life safety, have the death issue, that we are concerned and want to get quicker response times.
I guess to recap where I'm at on the fire response stuff and sprinklering, it's drilled into me like how important life safety is in relation to fire. It's something that, it's like what I do for a living. The majority, I think, of what architects do is focus on fire life safety code. Everything we do is designed to get people out of the building safe when a fire occurs. And that's why, to me, like, the sprinkler issue was such a big deal before. Like, this really does come down to, potentially, whether people live or die. To me, it's not the same as, like, well, we'll build and then they'll catch up on the services. I'm fine with that if it's a water or a sewer or a road issue. It's just very different for me on this. And if, to me, the fire marshal says he's okay right now with what we're talking about, then that alleviates my issues. So, anyway.
So, yeah, I think the distinction is within rural response time, beyond rural response time. So, anybody else? We have questions of staff? Discussion? I personally don't see any reason why we wouldn't do the larger area since they've made that determination. And that's basically their recommendation. So,
I will, with no further discussion, I will move to approve. You got, somebody speaking?
I'm sorry, do I have somebody? Oh, I do.
Okay.
No, this is actually on 18, but you may speak if you wish. Did you have something you wanted to share with us on this topic?
Hello, my name is Melvin Hughes. I live at 3905 Noma Road. I own the property to the east of where you see the little purple signs up there in that corner. Okay, that 10 acres is what I own. This fire department thing, this is all new to me. I've never heard of this going on.
Rural response time, that's new to you?
About 4 years ago, we had a meeting with Oklahoma City. They were wanting to put water and sewer lines from Douglas Boulevard all the way out past Westminster. And there was a lot of people came to that meeting, and most people were against it because Oklahoma City said, well, we're going to put it out there because Davis Body Shop doesn't have water and sewer because Eagle Industries across the street is now a Superfund contaminated water site, and they can't drink their water. So all you people are going to have to pay for putting this water and sewer out there to the tune of, at that time, estimated $13,000 per acre owned and another $130 per month per acre owned, payments thereafter. That's what Oklahoma City told us. And we said, what about combining with Midwest City? Nah, we can't do that. We don't know anything about that. So this is all new discussion to me. I haven't heard nothing about a park down there. There's what's going on in that area that I know of. There's a company in there doing crushed gravel, asphalt stuff and things. So I don't know if that's going in as a park or what. But and here again, that was my concern about water and sewer. On the next project, I hadn't seen their development of what they proposed to put in and all that. So that's my concern is most people out there own 5 acres or more. They're on water and sewer of their own. And most of them are retired or working, and they don't have that kind of cash to just, okay, yeah, run it half a mile from me, and I'll pay you the difference after that to come and bring it to me.
Well, in this case, somebody who knows more about this than I do, please speak up. But it's coming from the west.
That's what I figured it would be.
It's going to be paid for by, I guess, a combination of the city of Oklahoma City and Midwest City, or totally by Midwest City?
The water line will just be paid for by Midwest City to extend it to their eastern boundary. So there's no, yeah. And then, the development as it occurs, the developers would pay to extend the sewer line. So,
but it doesn't require the people who live out there or own property out there now to bring it if they don't want it. I mean, because it's available doesn't mean you have to pony up the money and bring it to where you are.
That's what I would have understood, too. Yeah, okay, so I'm not too concerned with that, and like I said, with where I'm at, I'm not, Tuesday morning I sat in my bay window, we're drinking my coffee, looking out west at that wooded area of Tract 5, watching the deer play in my field. They go over the fence to the west, and that's where they live. I hate to see my deer go away, but that's Mox Nix, okay. But like I said, I was concerned with the water sewer situation, and from the meetings I've been involved in before. I've lived there for 28 years, so we've been there a while. My wife says, no, I'm not moving, so. Okay, all right, that's kind of what I had to say about all this. Okay.
Well, I'll keep your sheet, and when we get into the next item, if you want to share more with us, I'll call on you.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you. Okay, so
I'll move to approve comp plan amendment 2019-00005. The option that had the largest area recommended.
Second.
I have a motion and a second to approve item number 17 with respect to the larger of the two areas designated. Cast your votes, please. It is approved.
Item 18 is an associated application to rezone 9836 Southeast 29th Street from R1 to PUD 1750.
Good afternoon once again. David Box, 522 Concord Drive, here on behalf of the applicant, who is Joel Bryant, who's also here, as well as Mark Grubbs, who is the civil engineer for this project. I want to thank staff for their presentation. This is an application that well before we ever set out to draft a PUD, we did go meet with staff to talk about the utilities, to talk about the comp plan, and it was only after we had a level of comfort that staff believed that this was an area ready for the ULI designation that we then went forward with the PUD. So we drafted the PUD to be broken up into 5 different tracks. As staff said, proximity to Tinker, it is 1 mile from Post to Douglas. So the proximity to Tinker, all the wonderful things that we've heard in the news over the last 6 months about what's happening at Tinker, the new jobs, all of that, along with the services, is what's fueling an application such as this. So we've broken it into 5 separate tracks. In the PUD, as you follow along, you'll see track 1 is what we kind of contemplate to be a traditional commercial tract along 29th. As you get south of track 1 and track 2, it's more of a multifamily tract. You cross over Post Road at track 3. What we contemplate there is a duplex tract. 4 is call it light industrial / commercial along the frontage road there of the highway, and the same goes for tract 5. There are a handful of TEs that I'd like to address. Most of them dealing with comp plan matters. Obviously, we're looking at now on your staff report, page 24, paragraph 2, since the CPA was approved. So what staff is asking us and this is going to, so it's TE 2A. So A, they're asking to meet 40% required open space by incorporating the floodplain and existing trees into a scenic or usable amenity areas. We are fine with that. However, we would like to add the language, where feasible, after existing trees with that TE. And the chair is smirking at me, but I'd be remiss if I didn't remind the commission, when we talk about tree preservation, there's no way to enforce it. The code does not have a requirement that you seek a building permit to removing a tree. So understanding that developers don't want to remove all the trees, trees on developments, especially of a residential nature, are a point of sales, right? It's easier to sell lots that look like they have beautiful trees on it, but there will have to be some trees removed. And so we'd like to add, because I have a client who's a honest developer, he could easily say, yeah, we agree, and go clear all the trees. So we intend to keep as many trees, where feasible, within our development. So on A, I would like to add the words, where feasible, after existing trees. B says increase setbacks on the northern and eastern boundaries of tracks 3, 4, and 5, as well on the southern boundary of track 2 to create green belts, and it says at least 50 feet. We would like that to be 25 feet wide. Then it says healthy mature trees shall be preserved within setbacks. So we agree with the TE. We'd like to change 50 to 25 and add a provision where it does not apply to shared boundaries within the PUD, meaning we understand the desire and concern to have these setbacks where it is adjacent to a piece of property that is not within the PUD. However, we don't believe it necessary to have the extreme setbacks to, between the tracks within our own development. So we agree to it. We've changed, except for we'd like to change 50 to 25 and add the provision that does not apply to shared boundaries within the PUD, which would be limited to, tracks 1 and 2, 3 and 4, and 4 and 5. We agree to C and D as written. On E, it says specific plan shall include designs with usable pedestrian and vehicular connections between tracks. We are fine with the language. However, we'd like to add when feasible after the word vehicle connections. The reason being, it could be that you had a use that would be totally appropriate here within tract 5 along the highway or tract 4 along the highway, but to require vehicular connection through a residential development, it may not make sense, because you could have large trucks or things like that. We will always provide pedestrian connectivity, but we would like to have some flexibility on where vehicular connectivity would be required to avoid any ability to have large trucks or other types of traffic like that perhaps wouldn't be appropriate to be funneled through a residential tract.
And so what is it you're wanting to do to the TE?
Add the words, and we're committed to a specific plan, so there's going to be some element of coordination at that time, but we're wanting to add the words, I guess, when feasible, when practical, after vehicle connections.
Isn't there some other way to be a little more specific about what it is your concerns are, that, accepting large truck traffic, or, something that makes it a little more a little clearer what it is you're wanting to reserve there?
I'm not sure how. I mean, we could always throw the vehicular connection matter to a specific plan, perhaps. Certainly understand your point. I just don't know how to, in words, get it there with any clarity. But I'm open to suggestions.
I mean, the way they do it, I guess, at Traffic Commission, isn't it usually generally by axles? Or, I mean, is there some sort of more specific way to define what it is we're really trying to guard against here? I understand your concern, and I would agree that you don't want to create a path for large or heavy, vehicular cut-through, but just, if feasible, or, where possible, or that's a little fuzzy for me.
So what if we just say that vehicular connections will be addressed at specific plan?
That's fine.
I mean, we commit to always have the pedestrian, but I guess location and availability of vehicular connections will be addressed at specific plan.
So just to firm up that language, so we could rewrite TE2E to say, specific plans shall include designs with usable pedestrian connections, period. Vehicular connections shall also occur and as reviewed at specific plan.
I wouldn't want to say shall.
Vehicular connections.
I'd rather say vehicular connections may occur and will be reviewed and approved at the specific plan.
Vehicular connections will be reviewed and approved at specific plan.
Sure.
Okay.
Did you write that down?
I'm going to put the two of you on a committee together to come up with a little bit more specific language about stuff like that. I think I get where you're going, and I like that. I don't want to find myself at specific plan stage arguing about whether we can really do what we're talking about doing.
Understand.
Well, no, I mean, that's the reason I wanted to get that in there, Commissioners, because with that specific ability to review it, then when it comes in, our staff report won't say everything's in agreement. We'll have the chance to actually review this.
But what it also won't say is that, they're being, if not required, heavily preferred. I mean, it'll just leave it open to, So, okay, keep going.
F and G we agree to as written. H we agree to as written. J we agree to as written. And we would ask to delete I. As we are on an interstate, we believe that billboards, for the time being, while we still have highways, until Asa is chair of the non-highway committee, we meet spacing requirements, both state and local. We believe billboards to be an appropriate use on a highway. Therefore, we would ask to delete that TE.
You said F, G, and H are all good.
F, G, H, and J as written.
Got it.
Okay, so are we ready to talk?
What's that?
Are we ready to talk then about some specific things?
Sure, I'm happy to answer any questions you might have.
And as I was going through, I mean, I know there's this sort of catch-22. If you own property, we want to know what you're going to do with it. If you own more than a single piece of it, then we want to know how it relates to the other. This is kind of a difficult PUD because it's not really any kind of unified development. You know what I mean? It's really sort of 5 separate pieces of land, maybe at least 3 separate pieces of land.
Sure. And what you normally see is one large contiguous tract. Here it's,
and the fact that it's not completely contiguous is not necessarily the problem, but it's a lot to bite down on. You know what I mean? And when you've got all these different tracts, then you're kind of going back and forth, and what about this, and now what was this one, and so on. Part of that is a thing about the staff report itself, and I'll get into that with staff. But you also have to always, and this is just me maybe, but I think we do have to always look at sort of maybe worst case scenario is not quite the right way to look at it, but you have to look at what each little component of it actually provides and would permit. So, for instance, Tract 1, which has these C3 uses, and I don't quite understand, we can come back to this in a minute, the idea that certain of them will be allowed before there's the water and sewer extended. But it also includes 3 and 4 family residential. So even though you look at Tract 1 and you say, okay, this is commercial tract, that's what they're seeking, they want C3, and you're thinking about it in those terms. In fact, it could be however many acres it is of apartment buildings. And to look at that and consider that and think about that in terms of both its relationship to the whole and its relationship to the surrounding properties is just a very different thing than to think about it as, for instance, a commercial tract. So I have that particular issue with respect to Tract 1. I have a similar but slightly different, the same issue with respect to Tract 3. That could all be apartments. Tract 4 could be a giant car dealership because that's one of the many, or a giant mobile home park. And so, when you're going through these kind of giant PUDs and you're looking at them in terms of what they are and what they could be, and they could be a whole lot of some of this stuff, I think it's difficult to really genuinely evaluate. I will acknowledge to you, and I'm sorry that it was true that I was not able to meet this morning to discuss this. I think most of these issues are issues that probably we wouldn't have been able to solve this morning across the table, but it would take a little bit more time than that. I would ask you in the future when you have something this complicated that I at least hear from you a little earlier in the process. But I would like to hear you address my specific concerns about the giant car dealership, for instance.
So let me start with the question about why you see the asterisks with sewer. So we spent a lot of time talking to utilities through this process, primarily on this point. And so we really went use by use and got kind of their blessing on the things that they would be okay with, because there is a little bit of an unknown as to when the sewer and water get there. We think it's fast, but who knows? And so we went through and added some language about appropriate DEQ approval and went use by use as to what uses would be problematic, which uses wouldn't. So those were thoughtful considerations with staff present. So you mentioned Tract 3. I don't see, I may be missing it, I don't see the multifamily use unit.
3 and 4 family residential?
So that's like a threeplex. That's not I thought your concern was an apartment project. That's not what that would be. The multifamily residential use unit is what would be required for that.
Okay. Okay.
We can remove the car dealership. We can remove the car lot.
Or it could be personal storage. It could be a whole lot of personal storage.
Well, so with the nature of Tinker and the nature of people that they're going to be buying houses, frankly, personal storage makes, I think, a lot of sense when you have...
Yeah, my point is not necessarily that any of the uses in particular are problematic. It's just that it's very difficult to absorb this much information and think about it realistically in terms of future development. And when you're thinking of it as part of a package, that's one thing. When you're thinking about it as acres and acres of something, that's a little different.
Well, and again, we do commit to a specific plan. So, there is at least another opportunity.
I'm going to limit uses on a specific plan?
No. But you're saying how all the uses interact. There is another opportunity to see it.
Well, I really agree with Commissioner Powers on this, in that, as we've seen these things in the past, when it comes back for specific plan, we really don't have a chance to review it. I mean, that's true. We're getting to see it, but as long as it complies with what's in the PUD, then it's moving on. And here, her comment, which I think is on point and appropriate, is that with all of this, what's in the PUD, trying to decipher through, thinking through a development of this scale and including language in here that may be required is very, very challenging to convert language in this to that picture, or what that picture could look like with the language in this. I think that's
the problem
fair.
being you tend to look at the picture, and even though we tell ourselves it's just a picture, you tend to look at the picture and think, oh yeah, okay, so this is residential and this is, whatever. And you do have to remind yourself that, it's the black and white here, the verbiage, the text that really controls.
And to that end, I mean, what I would submit is that what we have provided in terms of uses are appropriate. Like, regardless of what this looks like, if the test is, are the uses appropriate for the tracks, given now the new comp plan designation and where it's located and, the surrounding environment, I believe what we've provided is appropriate.
I would say I would agree, except I think she made a really good point in that you could have, outside of track 3, you could have track 1 and 2 and 4 be nothing but apartments that are then going to spill out onto infrastructure that is probably, for the foreseeable future, wholly inadequate to support that much. I'm not to say that it will, but I mean, maybe I'm overly sensitive to this in Ward 8 along the Memorial Corridor between Rockwell and MacArthur and all that. I mean, I think what you could do is you could take out a lot of that density, and you could create a potential to come back if that multifamily were really needed, and then we would have a chance to review that density in line with the infrastructure.
Is track 4 the concern with the multifamily?
I think it's the sum of, at least for me, if I'm listening to Janice correctly, and at least interpreting my own way, it's the sum of all parts. It's a lot of parts.
It's a lot of parts. It could also be a mobile home park, which is, why anybody would ever put a mobile home park anywhere in Oklahoma is beyond me.
Because they make a lot of money.
Be common there.
They're very profitable. That's why they do it.
So one way to address that we've done in the past is, if you think about this may be a bad example, but the PUD, the 7th one, north of Quail Springs Mall, we could limit the PUD to no more than 500 total units, right? So that you don't have a large apartment complex in 1, 2, and 4. So spread out over the entirety of the PUD, there's no more than 5 multifamily dwelling units.
I actually love this approach. I think it's the way we should do density on all projects, where we say, here's how many units you get, and you can arrange them however you want. Personally.
I don't have any issue with track 5. It's clearly a commercial track that fronts the interstate, done deal. Track 1, commercial track that fronts 29th or 25th, that doesn't bother me. I think it's just the idea of how much demand can this infrastructure really support between tracks 2, 3, and 4 as it relates to, to that being potentially all multifamily. So the use would, the total number of units would lessen that, and it would at least force another discussion right down the road if it were going to exceed that, which I think that's reasonable.
And if there was a mobile home park, that could only be in track 4, right?
As I read it, yes.
Yeah, as far as uses go.
So the 500 limitation is to the multifamily use unit, right? The apartment. That's what we're talking about.
For me, at least, like I said, I love the approach, but it's specific to the tract. I would need to say, okay, how many per tract, and have some understanding then of
Well, the use unit's only allowed in 1, 2, and 4. And so you would know that there would be no more than 500 units spread out, potentially over 1, 2, and 4.
But you could put them all on one track then, right?
Or maybe, I mean, depending on size, yes, but no more than 500 total for the project.
You're saying that each tract would have a unit limitation?
Yeah, I mean, let us know what you're thinking. I mean, I think to me, that's a pretty low bar. I don't know. We're giving you the flexibility of saying, yeah, we're going to do 500 units, right? I mean, assuming you get that through this commission. I know it's tough.
So I would actually, I hate to say this out loud, but I would have to have somebody, maybe yourself, explain to me whether you think 500 is high or low for the amount of infrastructure there is.
I genuinely can't answer that. I mean, that's the problem, is I don't know what the proper unit is. I just know that your point is very well taken in that it's a great idea that track 1 would be commercial and, you know, tract 2 might be something that's not but the reality is that it could be. And so you're talking about, that's a lot of zoning.
So the way that translates in my brain is, can't we be a little bit more specific here? Don't you know, do you have a better idea than this about what you're really going to do with this property?
No.
So if one's going to be commercial, then let's let it be commercial and not commercial or apartments.
But they don't. I mean, I think that's why, you know, again, a long time ago, they went out and, I mean, literally decades ago, they went out and zoned all that land in suburbia in Ward 8, you know, for apartments, and it was, I mean, really it was to secure the zoning, and now they've come back and they're building it all, and it's like, and that's, I mean, that's kind of why I see the point here is you let all this get zoned for multifamily, and a few years from now we're going to go, what?
The slight difference there being, and I'll confess that really was decades ago.
Yeah.
Versus, you know, I don't think this property is going to sit there for decades, you know.
Who knows?
It's much more likely to develop, I think, within at least foreseeable future. The other thing about that was, you know, anything that they're doing now is coming back from that, right? So, that was my question. Couldn't we be a little more specific about what we're going to do with the property?
I mean, no. I mean, it's hard to, right? When you have this much land and spread out in the fashion that it is. I mean, I think the best we can do is limit the number of total units for the multifamily use unit. You know, spread out over tracks 1, 2, and 4.
I just don't feel able to evaluate whether the infrastructure, you know, would support 500, you know, units versus, you know, 1,000 or 200 or, you know.
Fair enough. And at that time, I mean, you know, I think there are hooks that building permit has when it comes to infrastructure with demand at the time of permit.
Commissioner Privet, what are your thoughts on this deal, man? Jump in here.
The area's been, I mean, it's been like this forever. It's been, you know, trailers, scrub oaks and trees all around it. I'd like to see it develop personally. I'd like it to be a nice development too. I don't want a bunch of trailer parks. Nicer than what we got, I guess. That's fairly better either. There was going to be a boat dealership across where Tony's was. I don't know what happened there, but that got withdrawn, and Tony's is closed now. That was about the only development we've had on that. Tony's, yeah, tree plantation right there across the street. I'm with you all. I mean, I'd like to know specifics too, but can you provide those? At this point, I don't know. But it is a big development. I'd like to see it happen personally.
Well, look, just in the essence of trying to advance the conversation, I mean, I'll take a stab at it. Like, I mean, he's not going to like this, but I mean, why not make it to where we eliminate multifamily in one of those tracks, and they can always come back. I mean, they'd be able to go through that process again, but at least we know we've cut the density down, right, and we have a chance to review it in line with what develops in the interim. I mean, that's one way to do it.
I don't know that you cut the density down. We've cut the density down ourselves by limiting the number of total units.
I know. But if we took multifamily out of track 2, for example,
we wouldn't agree to that.
I know you wouldn't. But I'm trying to advance a discussion that's clearly stalled.
I want to be very clear where we stand.
I get that you're not going to agree to it, but if tract 1 is commercial and you eliminated multifamily from that, and so if you decided to develop it that way, you'd have to come back. That seems reasonable.
We believe there's an opportunity for some, bleed over with the multifamily into tract 1.
Those are my spitballs. I'm open to suggestions here.
Isn't there anybody here who can give me some input here? I mean, I hate to rely on the applicant, but I will if I have to. 500
Great.
units, where, could you put 500 units on track 4?
Yes. Could you physically place
Yeah.
them? Yeah.
So, if all of track 4 were developed multifamily,
Well, then we'd be out.
but I'm just saying, would it hold 500 units? You're saying yes.
Potentially. Depend on the development style, but yes, I think the land would be
Would
there.
they be 5-story tall?
If you think back to
I'm
the-
literally trying to think about how much space it would take.
Right. A lot of that depends on the development style. I'd probably rely on Commissioner Highsmith as it relates to how to design them. Obviously, if it's garden style, it'll be developed very differently than if it's a wrap project.
You could, it's a maximum height of 3 stories and 50 feet. So you could build 3 stories or 50 feet on track 4. You could easily get 500 units there.
Okay.
If it were designed that way.
Okay.
If it were designed as
Could you get
3-story
a,
apartments.
could you get 1,000?
No.
No,
I don't think
so
you get 1,000.
If you did garden apartments, that's like 20-ish units per acre. How many acres is tract 4 again?
Mark, how many acres is tract 4? 19.
19 times 20.
So that's about 400 acres, or 400 units.
Yeah.
Okay.
Then that's kind of the standard 3-story apartments that go up in the city.
Okay, so based on that total thumbnail sketch, I would be willing to go with a 500-unit cap in density across the
Tracts.
entire PUD.
Tracks 1, 2, and 4.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yes. To that use unit. Yes.
Yeah, for me, it really is about it not being all of one thing, right? The way it is worded now and without any kind of limitation, all of those tracks could be nothing but as many apartments as you could build on them, and that's a problem for me. If we're looking at it, and it's not even that so much. It's not that any particular thing is a problem for me. That's not where I started from. It's just the idea of trying to evaluate the developments, right? And knowing that it could be all of one thing or the other, just like it could all be a giant auto mall. That's just a very different thing than what I'm thinking about as I look at this. So I can live with 500-unit cap.
Did you guys work it out, David?
Yeah, so I just wanted to make sure we were clear and say yes, 500-unit cap for that use unit, which is in tracks 1, 2, and 4.
We'll add that as TEK.
It really throws me when it's letters and not
TK,
numbers.
Commissioner.
He's looking at you, right? Okay, what else?
Can we talk mature trees for a second? So here's my question.
Yes, I would love to.
I have never seen a new subdivision development that, you drive down the street and there's mature trees on it. It just doesn't happen, right? So that tract 3 right there, when they come in, to be honest, right, it's probably all going to be bulldozed, it's going to be cleared, and then we're going to come in.
There will be trees removed, yes. I am told by the Commissioner for your ward, who has a lot of knowledge of this specific tract, that it's mostly made up of scrub trees and cedars.
There's some big ones in there, but, around houses.
Well, I don't know, what's the makeup of cross timbers?
The tornado took out a bunch of them at 29th and Post at one time.
I'm not smart enough to know what cross timbers are supposed to be.
I don't either.
Not scrub trees and, I don't know, what is it?
Well, blackjacks and scrub oaks and stuff, it's like cedar. It's kind of a nuisance to some, but, you want maple trees and oak trees, stuff like that. I do anyways, elm trees, but oaks and post oaks. I don't even want to burn them in my fireplace. They just don't smell good. I mean, just nasty tree.
Well, part of it, though, right, is not necessarily that they're there for human use, but for the wildlife? Is that what cross timbers?
Yeah, the cross timbers are the historical, you know, what most of this area was originally covered with, and it does, you know, involve a lot of those kind of those different types of oak, and not only that, but the understory. Yeah, there I think are a fair amount of cedars out there that are invasive, but it is, you know, I've personally been out there, but it is classified as the cross timbers. So the native understory and trees and habitat.
Hey, I know it's one of those things that, you know, technically it's a suggestion, but I'm one of the commissioners that likes the commitment. So I'd love to know how we're going to preserve mature cross timbers forest, and especially in Track 3.
I think mature is the key, you know.
When feasible, a specific plan, we're going to tell you.
What does that mean?
What does...
It could be, you could come back and be, look, it wasn't feasible to save any of them.
Of course, fair enough. But to the same point, instead of sitting here, he could be out on a bulldozer bulldozing them all right now.
Well, are you guys going to come back at the specific plan stage and show us common areas?
So we'll have to plat the residential pieces.
Right? Well, Track 3, wouldn't it have the ability to have a large common area that we'd say, here's where we're preserving it?
Well, and so in Tracks 3, we do have requirements of, you know, the extra setbacks, where they require the healthy, mature trees shall be preserved within the setbacks that we did agree to.
Sure.
I mean, there's some element that we've agreed to.
No, seriously, don't we have like a common area requirement, like in it? Or is
A what?
Am I thinking about the subdivision regulations wrong here? There's no other common area than what surrounds it.
No, there will be common area within the development too. What I'm saying, we've specifically, outside of the subregs, have agreed to a green belt strip, right? But the subregs will have their own requirement for open space and common area and things of that nature.
So, today, are you guys going to make a commitment to some percentage?
No.
10%?
Because, I mean, who would be the arbiter of what the percentage is?
Yeah, I agree. Yeah, how do we enforce it? But
Can't is the reality.
Well, the best I can do is ask for a commitment.
Right.
I hope that it's the honor system and you guys are going to do...
Fair enough.
So, you know? So
I'm not going to ask for a commitment from them, though. I love trees. I would only live in a neighborhood with trees. That's why I bought where there was trees. It was an old neighborhood. But if I didn't care, I'd go to a neighborhood that did not have trees. So whether you love trees or don't love trees, you choose your life accordingly. But if they need to clear the trees as feasible, I'm fine with them clearing what they need to clear.
For me, like, I guess I'm taking my marching orders to some degree from our comp plan, right? And our comp plan went through the public process, and the public said they felt this was important. So to me, it's not necessarily like who's going to buy this land. It's like, what are we talking about? What are our values, I guess?
So whatever the comp plan requires on trees, I think then that's fine. But if it's just a suggestion of try to preserve trees, I'd like that too. I probably agree with the comp plan. I like trees also, so to the extent feasible, I would like them to preserve the trees. I don't think we can do anything more than that, so I'm not going to ask for some side commitment that they may or may not abide by.
So here's the thing. This is another one of those areas, and I have a whole stack of these things where I've circled and written and made notes and highlighted, that we have as an aspirational goal, that we have not yet found a way to efficiently or efficaciously translate into actual either policy or ordinance. We have this thing with stream beds where, so many feet on either side of the natural stream bed, and every time somebody finds that on their staff report, they tell us, I don't know what that means, I can't do that. So, this thing about tree preservation, I think it's just like the aquifer renewal. It is important. It was a hugely important piece of the discussion during the comp plan. For some reason, It has not found its way into some kind of enforceable or even very well articulated actual policy or requirement. And I think it's very important. This is not something I think we should push off to when we get around to updating the code. I think we need to develop that, and I think we need to have something we can definitely point to. In the meantime, unfortunately, I think other than just a willing commitment from an applicant, I'm not sure that we have a very good way to require it. It's true, we could say, oh, you're going to save every tree that's over 4-inch in caliber. It's like, okay, you know. It's like, except the ones that are in the middle of the road that they're going to dig out, or except the ones that are where they're going to lay the pipelines, or except the ones where, I mean, there's just no way to actually come up with an end result that is enforceable and that means anything.
But we have this conversation all the time. Are you saying we should stop?
No, I think we should seek the commitment, but I don't think we can impose it. Legally, I don't think we can impose it. Go for it.
Which we've asked of others, and I think is fair to ask.
It's fair to ask.
For me, I need the commitment.
Understood.
That's where I'm at. I want to see the commitment. If you guys commit, I'm happy. Everything else we've talked about here sounds good. On board. But on this one thing, we have a comp plan that in totality right now, right, is a suggested document until we get it into our...
Understood. And the problem is, I don't know that this is something you could ever even codify. Unless you require tree removal to require a permit, which I can't in my mind imagine how you do that. I could commit to 40% just like I could commit to we're going to breed nothing but unicorns out here. Doesn't mean it could ever happen. And so what's the point of putting things in a PUD if they're ceremonial? The whole point of a PUD is this is the ordinance that governs the development of this property. And it's not, I think, an appropriate vehicle to put ceremonial gestures.
Well, then I would love the ceremonial gesture.
Well, ultimately, the applicant needs to count to 5. So if you're telling him the only way he's going to get your vote is if he agrees to do that, I'm sure he'll take that into his calculations.
Councilor Box, there was a portion of the comp plan that would encourage you to get a certified arborist to determine the health of the tree canopy and then commit to your percentage, which has a targeted goal.
Right. We're not going to hire an arborist.
Fair enough.
Edmond has an arborist on staff, right? Like, there's some ways to do it, but in the end, I mean, the irony is, if the city of Oklahoma City was going to come widen this road, you know what they would do? They'd rip all the trees out.
You know how I feel about roads.
Understood.
I'm consistent.
You're not going to win that
You
argument.
are absolutely consistent, and I respect that.
Okay.
Can't get there, and so I would ask for the TEs as proposed to be amended, and I'm happy to go through those briefly again.
So did somebody have a list of the TEs?
I do. I can help Commissioner Privet if necessary, but...
Okay.
Okay, so are we, first of all, Mr. Hughes had signed up to actually speak on this item. Did you have anything else you wanted to say to us about it? Other than how hard those benches are to sit and listen to us?
One more item I'm thinking about while y'all are talking about this. The service road to the south of track 4 and 5 comes down and then around the corner, but Williams Sod Farm has continued that road down to the east about another quarter mile and back up into a great big dirt pit. And trucks run in and out on that service road almost daily. I mean, big, long hauling trucks, and that's a dirt road, and it creates a tremendous amount of dust. The applicants may not have realized that, may not have thought about that, but if they do any development in that track 4 and 5 area, that will have to be addressed, or you're going to have a lot of people hollering.
They mentioned they're going to pave it within their...
Okay. And as far as track 3, all the trees on that place, guys, I lived across the street on Post Road when I was 16 years old. That's been a long time ago. Track 3 was a bunch of scrub oaks back then, and it's still a bunch of scrub oaks. You can't walk through it. You can't stand up and walk anywhere through that. Deer can get through it, but not people. And so if it all gets bulldozed down and they plant some nice trees around there, it'd be great. It really would. So, I'm sorry about your scrub oaks, but, you know.
Your check on the way out.
Okay. Like I said, I've lived in that area. I bought my place 28 years ago. I've lived there since I was 14, 15 years old. I've lived in that area. I know across the I-40, the Bakers, the one that has the Model T stuff. I knew that family long before they ever acquired all that stuff. So my property used to belong to one of their uncles as a homestead. So anyhow, development would be great. It would improve the place. I think would help a whole lot. Okay?
Thank you. Thank you for coming to speak to us, and thank you for putting up with us through all this discussion. Okay. Are we ready for a motion?
Move for approval of item number 18 with a couple of amendments to the TEs. A, add where feasible after existing trees. And B, change 50 feet to 25 feet. And E,
And
accepting the shared boundaries within the PUD.
Yeah. Adding the sentence, "This shall not apply to shared boundaries within the PUD."
Okay. D's good. D's good. E, we said we're feasible, but did we?
No, actually, Commissioner Cravens had some language you wrote down.
Yeah, Commissioner, it should read, "Specific plans shall include designs with usable pedestrian connections and vehicular connections shall be reviewed and approved at specific plan stage."
Okay. Agree with TE, F, G, and H. Delete I, and agree with J. And also add K, which would be a 500-unit cap, multifamily. And 1, 2, and 4 tracks.
Second.
I have a motion and a second to approve item number 18 with the amendments to the TEs as read. Cast your votes, please.
Thank you.
Item 19 is an ordinance for public hearing and recommendation relating to broadcast and telecommunication towers, amending the zoning and planning code.
Who's presenting? You're up.
This is the amendment to the tower ordinance that you've seen presentation on both in Urban Development Committee and at introduction, and today is just the vote on the final hearing.
Commissioners, did we have any questions about this? We had a fairly extensive presentation on it last time. If not, I'll take a motion. I guess before we do that, is there anybody here who wants to be heard on this item? Now I'll take a motion.
Move approval on the ordinance.
Second.
I have a motion and a second to approve item number 19. Cast your votes, please. It is approved.
Item 20 is a resolution adopting the downtown development framework as amended for implementation and referring the amended framework to the City Council to receive for concurrent adoption.
Hi, Lisa Chronister. I made a presentation about a month ago on the DDF, and now we're asking for the resolution to be adopted and referred to City Council.
Commissioners, did we have any questions concerning this matter? We did have a fairly extensive presentation. Is there anybody present who wishes to be heard on this item? If not, I'll take a motion if we don't have any questions of staff.
Second.
I have a motion and a second to approve item number 20. Would you cast your votes, please? It is approved.
Thank you.
I believe that's the end of our regular agenda. All of the other items have been either continued or withdrawn. Additional items, I'm not aware of any. Planning Commission committees, I'm not aware of any of those either. Planning Commission members, I'll go first. There was an item, you probably got an email. Our former city manager, Glendale, has passed away. He was city manager from 98 to 2000. It was right at the very beginning of the first MAPS process. It had kind of run into some budgeting problems, and there was a shortfall in revenue, and he was hired on and came in and kind of set up some different processes to deal with that and sort of bailed us out. And I think, given the enormous success of the MAPS programs and the fact that a stumble there would have really altered the course of the city, that it behooves us to express our condolences to his family and to remember that he made a significant contribution during his time here. He had been hired previously, maybe about 10 years earlier, as the financial manager. So, I mean, he came from that background into the city manager's office and served us well during his time. Other members of the commission, have anything else to say? Anybody? Everybody wants to go home so bad. Planning department.
Sarah, do you have any more information on the study session? We're just trying to set the study session for Preserve OKC and possibly other things.
Thank you to whoever responded to my availability poll. We have about 3 topics to bring to you in a study session and 1 Urban Development Committee meeting. That would be a change to the zoning code unrelated to the code update. And so we're trying to get those in between now and the end of March. So I'm just letting you know we're going to try to combine topics as possible. We're going to try to get everybody in there and make good use of your time. But we're looking probably at the February meeting and then potentially the one towards the end of March. Yes?
So the next February meeting, we would cover the Preserve OKC.
Yeah, I really don't want to delay that recommendation of council one way or the other.
And also the ordinance change?
We have an ordinance change, and it's a different type of meeting that requires a quorum, so I'll make a quorum call to confirm before we set that meeting. But that would be, we're going to combine 2 topics just to try to make better use of your time.
So I would really encourage you to give some thought to Preserve OKC if you have questions that can be answered ahead of the meeting. But I do want us to have at least the opportunity to meet in a kind of more informal setting, talk a little bit about philosophy and policy, before we send that on. So that's why I've asked for them to do it in a study session. It's so hard to do that kind of thing up here, although we did a pretty good job of it today. I'm just saying, it is difficult with people waiting and, having to sit on those hard benches and knowing that, the meeting is pressing on us. It's difficult to have those kind of conversations. And I'm glad we did, so I'm not looking at you any particular way. Development services? No? Municipal counselor? No, I know she wants to be out of here. Citizens to be heard? There are none. Other business? There is none. Adjournment? I'll take.
Motion. Second.
All in favor? Aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Thanks, you guys. You really hung in there today. You're welcome. You can keep it. You can.